everyone, massive welcome to our first Bowel Cancer UK patient event of 2022.
It is our first, yes. We're so thrilled so many people could join us today.
Yes, I think the last count this morning we were at over 180.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are lots of you who are not watching alone, and we'll come to that a bit later on. So I'm Catherine Winsor, and I'm Director of Services at Bowel Cancer UK, and I'm one of your hosts for today.
And I'm Genevieve Edwards, Jen, most people call me, and I'm Chief Exec at Bowel Cancer UK and another one of your hosts today.
Yeah, so we'll be with you in between, popping up, probably talking about cake. It's usually a theme for the day. So before we plunge into the real reason you're all here today, there's just a few bits of housekeeping for me to whip through. So if everyone can just bear with me. I know this is when you're all making cups of tea and getting comfy.
Getting settled.
Absolutely.
Maybe a biscuit.
Oh, of course. It's 10:30.
Yeah.
Chocolate digestive.
Absolutely.
So today's event is being sponsored, and we're really fortunate to have had some sponsorship from pharmaceutical company Pierre Fabre Limited. They have just provided the money that pays for our time and resources to be able to do this. They've not had any input into the agenda or the content. Everything that's coming to you today is independent and direct from Bowel Cancer UK. You may already have discovered at the bottom of your screen or at the side of your screen the chat box facility. So if you click on chat at the bottom of your screen, what pops up is a chat box where lots of people are saying hello, introducing themselves. And we've also got our fabulous Bowel Cancer UK team there today in the chat box. I think who's in there at the moment? We've got Sharon, Mark, Hayley from Bowel Cancer UK is in there.
Veronica.
Yeah. So do introduce yourselves, do pop any comments you've got in the box, and we'll refer to them throughout when we can. You'll also spot at the bottom of your screen there is a Q&A emblem, so two little speech bubbles that say Q&A. During the speaker chats and the presentations, that's where we'd really like you to ask any questions that you've got. And what we do then is that Jen and I will pick from those questions. We'll do our best to get through them all. We'll ask the speaker the question on your behalf. It's completely anonymous. You can tell us your name if you want, but you don't have to. And obviously, we're not in a position to be able to answer specific medical questions about your particular bowel cancer. But if it's a general question, the chances are somebody else is thinking exactly the same thing.
Yes.
So definitely ask it. If we're not able to answer all of the questions, what the team do is afterwards we will be going through the questions and putting answers out after the event. So you should get your question answered even if we don't get to it live.
Yeah, and we sometimes get lots of questions that are similar, aren't they? In which case we kind of, that's great, we scoop them up together and do it that way.
Yep.
Morning, Dipti.
Yes, lots of people saying hello to everyone. Just to let you know, we are recording today's session, because afterwards we'll be putting it on our YouTube channel so that you'll be able to watch it again if there are bits of it that you missed, but also we'll be able to share it with everybody in our bowel cancer community who perhaps hasn't been able to be with us today or perhaps can't stay for the whole event. And again, your names and the stuff in the chat doesn't appear on the recording. It's just us and our speakers. At the end of the event, there's the dreaded evaluation. So we will be, if you signed up, we will be sending you out an evaluation form just asking you how you think we did, what you thought of the content, any suggestions and ideas for how we can improve these events moving forward. And then just the final little bit of housekeeping is that at various points during the sessions, we'll be asking you to take part in a poll. And so it will appear on the screen and it'll just be a question, and we're just asking it to gauge who we're talking to and what you know about us, and perhaps ask you some questions that will help our speakers understand the audience and who's watching. So going to put you all to the test now. Jen and I are sat in our hub, which is in Vauxhall, South London, but we want to know where you are around the world. And we are saying world because do you remember last time, Jen?
Yeah.
We had somebody from Hong Kong, so Hong Kong is our target to beat, but we have a poll, if we can put that up on the screen now, and we'd love it if you could just indicate to us whereabouts you're joining us from today. 4 nation coverage. Oh no, not quite.
Northern Ireland almost.
Oh.
So, oh, look at that.
Oh, yes, lots of England.
I've just got back from Scotland,
You
so it's been great to see that.
And nobody from outside the UK.
Haley's joining from Manchester
at the moment. Brilliant. Okay, that's great. Thank you. And then our second question. So we can all see the results there. Lots of people from England, Wales, Scotland, nobody from Northern Ireland yet. Yet. There's still time. And then our second question is about who's watching with you. Are you watching on your own? Or are there other people with you? And this just gives us a bit of an idea as to how many people we're reaching. So if you could now tell us how many of you there are, and then we do ask another question. If you're with somebody else, just tell us a little bit about them. We got lots of plus ones.
Yeah, look at that.
Brilliant.
That's really
no
nice.
parties happening yet, though. It's a Saturday morning. I don't know. Some family members. Let's give people a few more seconds just to let us know. Oh, it's always, I love it when there's a flurry in the blue lines.
Yes.
No 3s or 4s yet. Oh, a 3. Brilliant.
There we are.
Got a 3. Excellent. Okay, thank you so much, everyone.
And we share those results.
Share those results with you, so you can see we've got lots of people watching on their own, lots more people watching with one other person. Oh, Jo says it won't let her submit, but it's just her. So we'll count you, Jo. And lots of people watching with partners and with family members. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Keep your fingers near that poll button because we will be coming back to that to ask questions later on. So I'm now going to hand over to Jen, who's going to just say a few words and talk to you about Bowel Cancer Awareness Month.
Yes, so thank you for that, Catherine. I'm really looking forward to today. As I say, I've just been in Scotland for a few days, talking to all sorts of people about how to improve bowel cancer screening. I went up to Dundee to speak to Professor Bob Steele about that. Fascinating. I also spoke to the Royal College of Surgeons at a conference there all about colon capsule endoscopy. You know, the little pill that
the camera you swallow.
And they're leading the field in Scotland on that. They've had 2,000 patients go through that from February. So yeah, and I know that there are plans in England for a pilot. Wales is trained up about 10 clinicians to do that as well. So it's coming to Wales. Northern Ireland have got plans, but they've not yet started to action them. So that was really amazing.
Really interesting.
Absolutely amazing. But yes, Bowel Cancer Awareness Month. Now, I think we've got a slide here that we can pop up. Why do we put that up? Well, I'll just talk about it and we'll see. Oh, here it is. Here it is. There we are. So April, you may know, is Bowel Cancer Awareness Month. We're just over halfway through and it's gosh. I say it's a marathon and a sprint.
Yes. And I was about to say time flies, but I'm not sure it has flown, but we are having fun.
Yes, we're having great fun. And to kick this all off, we did a survey to find out from the general public if they could name any of the bowel cancer symptoms, you know, the common ones, because not everybody experiences them all and people experience different things. But do you know, Catherine, 4 in 10 couldn't remember a single bowel cancer symptom.
Goodness, that's really stark.
And that's really stark, because that's why we need Bowel Cancer Awareness Month. And what struck me about that is that that's worse than last year.
Yeah, it has got worse.
And I think this is the impact of the pandemic, because of course we've all been focused on COVID and we've taken our eye off other things, and that's very worrying. So we've got this little infographic you can see on the screen there that we've been sharing, and we've had hundreds of health organisations, CCGs, local NHS trusts have been sharing it all over their social media, and that's been a joy to see.
It's been brilliant.
So, you know, the power of partnership working with everybody else has been amazing. But if anybody here hasn't yet got involved in Bowel Cancer Awareness Month and you'd like to, there's still plenty more to come.
Loads of time. Yes.
Plenty more to come. So if you have a look at our website, you'll see a page called This is Bowel Cancer. And so many people have been popping up a photo. You don't have to, but they popped up a photo and then just shared a little paragraph about, you know, your story or what bowel cancer has meant to you or the impact it's had on your life. And that's a lovely way to do it. And actually, one of the things that we've learned, haven't we, is that personal stories on our website are the things that most people really value.
Yeah.
So it's just a lovely way of connecting with each other and supporting each other. So if you have a moment, just take a couple of minutes, go and do that. Tomorrow at 7 o'clock, we've got our Remember Together event. And this is where we all come together and just spend a moment thinking about the lives that we've lost and the people and the precious memories and those, just an opportunity to celebrate those special people whose lives were cut short too soon. We've got lots and lots of people, I think about 700 signed up to do that already. So if you'd like to join us, again, it's completely free. Have a look on our website for details and just light a candle and join in with, as I say, I think about 700 people. Next week, we are launching a little bit of an assault on the democratic institutions in all 4 nations. So we will be holding parliamentary events in England, Wales and Scotland. And it would be brilliant if you could email your local MP and ask them to come along. Again, all the details are on our website. It's just to click a link. There'll be a thing will pop up for you and it's dead easy to do. It takes a couple of minutes, but we've got some really good attendance. We've got some great attendance from politicians in all those nations, but we'd love more, because if we can bang that drum with politicians, we all know one of the barriers we've got at the moment is we just a lack of capacity in colonoscopy. So we need more people and we need better kit.
Yeah, need
for
more
that
stuff, more equipment, don't we?
Yeah, better kit so that we can get people diagnosed faster. And that's the problem, because we're hearing from around the NHS, once people are diagnosed, they're getting their treatment relatively quickly, but it's that diagnosis that's slowing things down. So we really want to nobble the politicians and get them to make the case while Sajid Javid is planning his 10-year cancer plan. So that's what we've got coming up for the rest of the Bowel Cancer Awareness Month. We're going to go out with a real bang.
Definitely.
And thank you all for everything that you've done to be a part of that. And there's plenty of time to join in if you haven't done yet. And now,
brilliant. So we've now got a short video for you, which has actually been made by one of our awareness volunteers, Rob. So Rob Moffat has very kindly told his story, shared his experience and life after bowel cancer treatment. So we're just going to share that with you because that will set the scene for today.
Rob Moffat. I was diagnosed with bowel cancer just about 6 years ago just now. I was 59 at the time. I'm a physical education teacher and then a professional rugby coach, so I feel as though my life I've been involved in sport and I've always been pretty fit. But around about that time, about 6 years ago, I was having bowel movements were a bit different. I was having to go to the toilet a bit more often. Never thought anything sinister at all. What eventually then happened was I was helping Romania rugby at the time. I was helping coach them. I was out in Romania and I had a bad day out there and I kind of thought, nah, there's something just not right here. Then when I came back home, it was just the time that I got another test, a bowel screening test. I sent it away, it came back and said would you do another one. So I sent that back and then I got an appointment to go to the hospital. Luckily the hospital that we use is about a mile from here, so you could walk to it. So I went there, got a colonoscopy. The doctor who did it right away thought there was something wrong because he could see the tumour and he thought it was something not right, which turned out to be a tumour, and they said pretty quickly it was cancerous. So, that was a bit of a shock. The way I look at it is far worse for my wife Sue than it was for me. It's very, very difficult for her in that situation, I think. Anyway, very quickly, 2 surgeons at the Borders General Hospital, very quickly they got me organised and I was in there probably within a month, I would say. Had the operation, I wasn't in hospital for too long and I've made a really good recovery. But I think the way I look at it is that I'm very lucky. They caught me pretty quick. I maybe could have gone to my doctor a bit earlier because I had a bit of blood in my poo and my stool, and that's a telltale sign that something's not right. But it wasn't as if it went on for too long, but I should have gone quicker to my doctor and get it looked at. But I'm lucky I've made a really good recovery. Everybody's different, but I was pretty fit, which helped me. As I say, I wasn't in hospital for long. As soon as I was out, I was walking. We live in a really nice part of the world, so it's easy to get out and do walks here. So I was out doing short walks. My main concern was just getting back to normal. I wanted to run because I like running and do that. And I got back to that within a few months. I said 12 weeks you'd be back to normal, which I was. So I thank the National Health Service and these two surgeons especially for looking after me so well. My wife for having a bit of patience. So for me, I would say to anybody, if you've any blood in your stool or any symptoms at all, go to your doctor right away. And when you're over 50 in Scotland, I think it's still 60 in England, when the test comes through the door, do it. Don't put it in a drawer, just do it and send it back right away, because there's over 90% you'll be okay if you're grade 1, which I was, but it goes down to about 8% or 10% if you're grade 4, so your chances then are not so good. I think I'm one of the very lucky ones. I ran the London Marathon 2 years after. I'm as fit now as I was 30 years ago, I think. So I'm probably a good story. So anybody who's listening to this who is going through bowel cancer, just have a really strong spirit and hopefully you'll get there. Okay, thanks very much.
Lovely story from Rob.
Absolutely, and Rob said it better than I could even ever try to hope to manage it. Yeah, have a strong spirit, and that's why we're all here.
That's why we're
today.
all here together.
So enough from us, I think, and on with the show. So I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker. I'm going to introduce you to Claire Coughlan, and Claire is actually Bowel Cancer UK's first ever clinical lead. She joined us in January, and we're super excited that she's on the team. She's transforming things already for us. So Claire has worked as a stoma nurse, and then she was colorectal cancer nurse specialist at Guy's and St Thomas NHS Foundation Trust in London before moving to Lewisham and Greenwich, which was where she still is. We share her with them at the moment. So Claire is here to set the scene for today, to talk about some of the topics that we're going to cover and why that's so important. Welcome, Claire.
Hi, Claire.
Hello, thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. I'm absolutely delighted that this morning's introductory talk has fallen to me. I'm just waiting for my slides to come up. Here they come. So yeah, thank you very much, Catherine and Jen. As I say, I'm Claire Coughlan, and I'm honoured to be the clinical lead for Bowel Cancer UK. I only started in January, and it's absolutely opened my vision to a much wider world that there is out there, and the changes that you can make through the charity. So thank you. But this morning, I'm going to start the introductory talk. And I'm going to talk about why we think it's so important to run events like this morning. So why are we having a health and wellbeing event, or living with and beyond bowel cancer event? I'm going to talk a little bit about bowel cancer and its treatments. I'm going to give an overview of those, about which many of you here today are far more expert than I will ever be, having experienced them. I haven't experienced them yet, but I think it's important to give an overview and to talk about the common side effects of treatment. And for some people, those side effects might be short-lived. They might just happen when you're having your treatment for bowel cancer, but for others, they might go on a bit longer. And I think it's important to talk about and recognise those. And then I'm just going to say a little bit about getting the most out of today. So why do we think this is important? This figure shocks me. I've been a bowel cancer nurse for many, many years, and I'm always shocked about prevalence. So 43,000 new diagnoses each year in the UK, and I think that's huge. But the thing that's absolutely fantastic, and the reason that events like today are so needed, is that people are living with and beyond bowel cancer for longer than ever before. People are surviving after a diagnosis of bowel cancer, and that's just fantastic news. Part of the reason for that is that we know that if you're diagnosed at an earlier stage, nearly everyone will survive bowel cancer. And we're really fortunate in the UK that we have a bowel cancer screening programme. By 2024, our government have pledged that everybody from the age of 50 will be offered bowel cancer screening. And I know that everybody on here will join me in saying, if you get the chance to have your bowel cancer screening, please have it, because it means a far greater chance of survival if the disease is caught early. But beyond that, we now have far more treatment than ever before for bowel cancer. A vast range of treatments. It used to be that you had surgery and you might be offered some chemotherapy, but now we have a much greater variety of treatment available. So the aim of this morning's event, I love this first statement, I wrote this, but I love it, is to provide information and enable you to make changes to promote healthy lifestyle choices. And the reason I love that is every time I read it, I think, yeah, that's what I need to do. That's what I need to do. I won't do everything that I'm told to do this morning, and I'm sure most people won't. But the aim is for you to be able to take bits out of it that you think might be useful for you and that may help you, particularly to better manage the consequences of cancer and its treatment. So the treatment for bowel cancer will very much depend on the staging. And this is a bit of a sort of a busy slide, but it's just to demonstrate that you might have been diagnosed with bowel cancer at a very early stage with, say, cancer in a polyp or just confined to the wall of the bowel, or you might have had some lymph nodes around the bowel at the time of your diagnosis. Or it may be that you were diagnosed at a more advanced stage and the cancer had spread off to other organs in the body. And whatever your staging was at the time of your diagnosis will mean that your treatment has been decided by this. So your team will have found out the stage and then they will have recommended treatment for you. So you may have had surgery, and that might have been done the open way, so with a cut in your tummy. Or it may have been done the laparoscopic way, so keyhole surgery with 3 little cuts in your tummy and some very clever instruments. Whichever way it was done, the aim will have been to remove the area of your bowel affected by the cancer. And you might have a stoma, and that's a piece of your bowel raised onto the surface of your tummy. And that might be a temporary thing, or it might be that you can't use your rectum anymore, so it might be a permanent thing. It may be that you've had radiotherapy, and that is given sometimes, most commonly, before surgery for rectal cancer. Sometimes it's given afterwards, and sometimes it's the only treatment you may have. You may have had chemotherapy, and again, that can be given before or very commonly after surgery. You often have a low dose of chemotherapy given at the same time as radiotherapy. And you might have had a biological therapy. You may still be having that, something called immunotherapy, in conjunction with your chemotherapy. So there are far more treatments than ever before available to us. But what we know about those treatments is that they don't just affect the bowel. They do affect the bowel, but they don't just affect the bowel. They can affect us physically from our head to our toes. So your nervous system, your reproductive system, your digestive system can all be affected by the treatment for bowel cancer. And on this slide, there are some of the effects. It's not an exhaustive list, but the effects will depend on the treatment that you've had. Now, it's important to say that for some people, they'll have lots of side effects, and those side effects may go on for quite a long time. The consequences of cancer treatment may go on for quite a long time. And that's part of the reason that today's event is so important, because you don't have to just live with it. There are things that can help with these side effects. For others, they might experience no side effects. Most people will be somewhere in the middle, and they'll have a bit of these. So if you've had surgery for bowel cancer, it's likely that you'll have a change in your bowel habit because you've had some of your large bowel, some of your rectum removed. You may have lost weight when you're having your surgery because hospital food's not great, let's face it. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that out loud. But it might be that your appetite wasn't great in hospital, or indeed after, when you first came home. You may have had a change in your appearance, so that wound that I've spoken about, and you may have a stoma. You may have pain after surgery, and that could be short-term pain as you recover from your operation, but it can also be longer-term, and that may limit your activity. Surgery can also impact your sexual function. Radiotherapy. So that makes you tired. Not least, I think, because for quite a lot of people that have had radiotherapy for rectal cancer, they'll have been going up and down to a radiotherapy machine for 5 weeks every day with weekends off. And that is exhausting before you even get to the fact that you're having radiotherapy. It may make you feel sick. Again, the theme is developing. There may be a change in your bowel habit. It can give you urinary frequency, cystitis, burning when you pass urine. Sore skin, and that sore skin might be on your bottom. And again, your sexual function and fertility can be affected. Now, I know one of our speakers will say a little bit about that later on, but I just think it's important to say here that we will have what we call a bite-size event later on in the year, concentrating on sexual function for both men and women. So please look out for that. We will publicise it, but I just think it's important to say that here. Chemotherapy, again, makes you really tired. And makes you prone to infection, might bring your hair out. And again, it gives you that nausea and sickness. Pins and needles, so that's something called peripheral neuropathy, where you get tingling in your hands and feet from a particular chemotherapy that you have for bowel cancer. Change in bowel habit, we continue that theme, and fertility. So there's a vast range of side effects that might be short-lived or might be a longer-term consequence. But we know that it's not just the physical effects of treatment for bowel cancer. So now this is a really busy slide. You don't have to zoom in on it. It's there just to demonstrate that it's very important that we look at the whole picture, we look holistically. This is something called a holistic needs assessment. You may or may not have seen, this is just an example of one from the London Cancer Network. You may or may not have seen one of these. You may have been given an iPad to fill one in. You may have been sent a link, or your clinical nurse specialist may just have asked you some of the questions that are on here that you probably can't read. But the reason this is important is that actually the physical side effects, whilst they're important, may not be the most important thing to you. The most important thing to you might be that you can't go and do your mum's shopping and do her hoovering anymore, or in the short term. It might be that you can't pick your children up from school, or it might be that you can't go to work at the moment and you're worried about money. So it's really, really important that for events like this, we at Bowel Cancer UK and your clinical teams look holistically. So for today's event, we've looked at what we really boringly call the data, but it's important. So we've looked at some of the data from holistic needs assessments. I've also looked at the colorectal cancer patient experience survey and the quality of life of colorectal cancer survivors and infant survey. There was one in 2015, there was another one actually in 2021, and the data for that is still coming through, and that gives us a really rich picture of what people that have been affected by bowel cancer are telling us. Perhaps most importantly for us here at Bowel Cancer UK is the feedback from our own events and our patient forums that allows us to see what it is, what information it is that people are asking us to provide. So we've been able to draw up a list of the most common concerns. Again, it's not exhaustive, but these are the things that people have most commonly told us. So the first thing is that people are telling us that they're worried. They're anxious, they're worried the cancer might come back, they're worried about the effects of the treatment, they're worried about the effect of that on their family, on their loved ones. They're understandably anxious. COVID, I think, hasn't helped with that for people having treatment for any sort of cancer. People also tell us that they need to know where to get good information, and events like today are very much about trying to provide that good information. People have told us that they're tired, they feel fatigued after their treatment for bowel cancer. And this can be a self-perpetuating cycle. And I'm going to say a little bit about the talks in a minute, but we've got a really good talk about this. You feel tired, so you can't exercise, so you don't sleep. You've got pain, you don't sleep properly, and it goes round and round in this circle of fatigue. Constipation, diarrhea, so that change in bowel habit that comes from treatment for bowel cancer. Making plans. People always, when I was a stoma nurse, people used to ask me about this, and all my time as a bowel cancer specialist nurse and nurse consultant, people have said to me, can I book to go on holiday next year? I will always say yes, please do, please do. But obviously, people are understandably concerned about making plans. I would always say plan for the future. You've had all this treatment, please plan for your future now. Tingling in the hands and feet, so that peripheral neuropathy that I spoke about. People also tell us that they're concerned about work, about whether or not they can still work and how to manage their effects, the effects of their cancer treatment, or they might want to be educated to, they've had an epiphany and they no longer want to do the job they did, so they want to be educated. The important thing to realise is that you don't have to put up with all of these side effects. There are things that can be done, and that's what today is about. The 10th thing on this list is other medical concerns, and I always think this is so unfair, because I think if you have a diagnosis of bowel cancer, then actually your high blood pressure and diabetes ought to go away, but it doesn't, unfortunately. So people are still concerned about that. So for today's agenda, we hope you will find the following topics useful. I'm not going to say anything about the speakers. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the content. So we've got a dietitian who's going to speak to us about our healthy lifestyle choices, and we can take some of that. I'll be determined to take some of that away with me. We've got a fantastic talk on bowel function and how to manage changes in bowel habit. We've got a brilliant talk about psychological issues and about, you know, how to manage anxiety and when it's a problem and when we need to do perhaps more about it. We've also got to talk about physical activity and managing that fatigue that people have told us is so concerning. We've got question and answer sessions after each of these. And I'm just delighted that we're about to hear such fantastic talks. What I would say is, take away what you need from it, use it. It might not be that everything's applicable, but I'm sure that some of these topics will be useful, and I certainly hope they are. So without further ado, I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to pass back to Catherine and Jen to get on and introduce these fantastic speakers. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Oh,
thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Claire. That was absolutely fascinating. I learned a lot.
Yes, definitely. We have had a question, which is an interesting question, and I just think where we've got a couple of minutes, it might just be interesting to sort of get your thoughts on it. So the question's come in from Paul, who says, I'm 43, diagnosed with stage 3 bowel cancer. Some of the consultants I've spoken to have said that they're seeing an increase in cases in younger people. Paul wants to know, are we seeing that through the data, which we know we are? So yes, there are more younger people being diagnosed. And he's just interested in what the reason might be. Do we know? Is it about detection? Is it about an actual increase in tumours? And then he poses the really interesting question, should younger people be targeted for screening, or is it about awareness? So I thought it would be quite interesting to hear your views, because I think Lynch syndrome is probably a really critical part of this.
Really important,
Yeah, so we know that Lynch syndrome, that's a genetic condition that can predispose to bowel cancer. We know that people that have Lynch syndrome are diagnosed at a younger age. They're prone to being diagnosed at a younger age. So the first thing I would say, if you have a family history of bowel cancer, it's really important to flag that to your GP. We have in the UK some of the best genetic departments in the world. And every area will have something called a family history clinic, where you quite often now, there are specially trained nurses, but it might still be a consultant that you will see, and they'll be able to talk to you about your family history. So that's the first thing. I think you're quite right. Younger people are being diagnosed more frequently. They're still by far much less likely to have bowel cancer. But the important thing is awareness of symptoms, and that's what we campaign for so often at Bowel Cancer UK and so hard. And we do a lot of work with primary care to help our GPs to recognise that when a young person comes to see you, it might not be bowel cancer, but you know what? It might be. So I think they're the most important things. If you have symptoms, obviously we would say to people, go along to your GP and be really firm, stand really firm and say, I want to be investigated. We have fantastic tests. We have something called a FIT test now, which is a simple stool test that will help your GP work out if you do need to be referred or not. If that's positive, you need to be referred. So yes, your oncologist or your surgeon is right. There are more people being diagnosed at a young age, but we're getting much better at that. And it's something we're very passionate about Bowel Cancer UK.
That's right, isn't it? Because we've been campaigning for that Lynch syndrome testing to be carried out widespread. And although it is supposed to be, I meet so many people. I was talking to people in Scotland yesterday about, you know, how it's not happening routinely. So if, as you say, if you have a family history, please do flag that with your GP. And actually the fit test with your GP is something that happened as a result of the pandemic, didn't it? So it's the bowel cancer screening test that's sent out to everybody over 60 in England, over 50 in Scotland and Wales. And that's so useful now, isn't it? That if you have symptoms, you can say to your GP, can we do a fit test just to rule bowel cancer out? And in most cases, that's what you will be doing. But as you say, Claire, if it is bowel cancer, the sooner you're referred for diagnostic tests, the better. And that goes back to what Rob was saying in his video, wasn't it?
Yeah, sorry, I would just add that for everybody here this morning, a lot of you would have had a diagnosis of bowel cancer. Your tumour should have been tested to see if it may well be Lynch syndrome. And if it is, you should then be referred to genetics. We know that guidance is being taken up quite widely, but if you haven't been told that that's happened, it's just worth checking with your clinical teams. I'm sure it will have happened, but just check, because for your family, if it is found to have been a Lynch-related cancer, they can all be tested, picked up early, or even be prevented from ever having a diagnosis of bowel cancer.
And I think that's definitely everything Claire said we would echo, and it's what we hear from the Never Too Young community.
Yes.
So our friends over at Never Too Young are focused entirely on supporting younger patients with a bowel cancer diagnosis. So if you are in that group and you want to know a little bit more, then you can find details of how to find Never Too Young on our website. Head over to them, loads of support, or you'll find a great community there.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Claire, that has been a wonderful start, I think, to today. You've really set the scene brilliantly.
I'd like to know how much you're paying Jez, because Jez says, thank you, Claire, such a lovely lady.
Oh,
and
you're
I mean,
welcome.
she is entirely, but Claire will put the check in the post, Jez.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jez.
So, thank you, Claire. On with our first speaker then. So as Claire says, one of the things that we're going to be talking about today is diet and how you can eat well after treatment for bowel cancer. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce our next speaker, which is Joanna Injore, who is a specialist oncology dietitian. I knew I was going to fluff that. And she's worked all over the NHS. She works with Macmillan Cancer Support and is director of her own business, JI Nutrition, where she provides private nutritional consultations and programs for people with cancer. So I think she's with us.
Have we got Joanna?
Yes, good morning.
Brilliant.
Yay,
Joanna, hello again.
How lovely to see you.
Yes, you too.
Lovely sunny morning where you are.
Yes, it is nice. Well, it's a little bit grey, but that's why I have yellow one to
I was going to say, you're bringing the sunshine. So we will hand over to you.
Great. Great. So good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be back here again presenting for Bowel Cancer UK. And thank you very much for the very good introduction. I'm just waiting for it to move on.
No.
You okay there, Joanna?
Yeah. I'm just
Waiting for control, I think.
Yeah, here we go.
Real.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so just a little bit about me. So as we've already been mentioned, I'm a registered dietitian, been practicing for about 18 years now. My career mainly has been focused with working with cancer patients, and I work in the NHS and private practice. And I put my, if anyone's on social media, you can follow me on Instagram or Facebook. I post lots of information about nutrition and cancer, and I've got lots of blogs as well on my website if you ever wanted to reach out and get some nutrition information. Okay, so today's presentation. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what makes up a healthy balanced diet, and then we're going to talk through some changes with that may occur with your bowel and how your diet can help manage that. And then we're going to sort of look at a bit about diet post-surgery and discuss weight changes that can occur. And then we're going to talk about fatigue, because we know that's such a common side effect during treatment and also after treatment, and see how we can manage that. And then lastly, we're going to just end about diet for cancer prevention and reoccurrence, and of course take some questions. Okay, so next slide. So here we are. What makes up a healthy balanced diet? And you may have seen versions of this plate model over a course of many years, but it's really useful to just look at the different types of food groups we should be included in our diet. So as you can see, the largest one is your carbohydrates, and they include your potatoes, your pasta, your wheat products, your rice, also things like cassava or couscous as well. And it's really good if you can include whole grain versions of these. Sometimes you're not able to if you're following a restricted sort of lower fibre diet, but if you can, going for the higher fibre options are better, and have about sort of 3 to 4 portions of this a day. Your next largest section of your plate should be made up of your fruits and vegetables, and we should be all aiming sort of for 5 a day and a mixture of different fruits and vegetables. Just to be aware that if you're being asked to follow a low fibre diet, you may be asked to cut back on some particular fruits and vegetables, and do follow the advice that you're given on that. But usually you're able to have some fibre, and that's even with a low fibre diet. The next section, we have your protein foods, and we should aim for sort of 3 portions of your protein foods a day. And those are your meats, your chicken, fish, and your meat alternatives as well. So things like your beans or pulses or tofu are your protein sources to include. And it's really good to include those because we need that for vitamins, but also to give us energy. We need that in conjunction with our carbohydrate foods. The next section we have is your dairy products. So we should be having about 2 to 3 portions of dairy products a day. And that's because it gives a really important source of protein, but also calcium that our bones need. And included in this section is also your dairy-free alternatives, like the oat versions or almond milk, etc. If you're choosing those dairy-free options, just make sure that you're not using the organic ones, because the organic versions don't have any minerals added back into the product, so then you won't have any calcium or any vitamins, so just be aware of that. And then the smallest section is your fats and oils, and it's really important to still include some of these foods into your diet because you need them for flavour, and you also need them for some vitamins as well, so your fat soluble vitamins, but it should be the smallest part of your diet. And it also includes your sort of cakes and biscuits section as well. And you know, those can be incorporated as part of a healthy diet as well. Okay, so thinking about portion sizes. So we talked about the different food groups, but it's really tricky to know what's a portion, especially when you're dishing out your meals. So a really good trick is to use your hands. So this model just gives you a bit of an idea so you can guide what your portion size is. And this is just for 1 portion. So for example, if you're having some fish or chicken, a portion is the whole size of your hand. If you're having beans or meat products, it's the slightly inner part of your palm. Carbohydrate portion, 1 portion is kind of what fits in slightly outer edge of your palm. And vegetables is 2 cupped hands is 1 portion. Your fruit is what fits in the inside of your palm. Sorry, and that will be things like berries or strawberries that would fit on the inner part of your palm. For like cheese products, it would be 2 fingers worth is the thickness for 1 portion. And your fats and oils is the smallest portion, as you've mentioned. So it's like the tip of your finger is 1 portion. So like that's the amount of oil you might use in cooking or butter. And as I said, keep that to a minimum. So I hope that kind of portion sizing idea gives it a bit helpful, because you know, we don't expect you to weigh your food or anything like that, but it just gives you a bit of an idea of what portion sizes you should be aiming for. Okay, so moving on to eating well after treatment. So what I've just talked about is about what is recommended, sort of guidelines for everybody when your appetite is okay, when you're feeling well. However, I know after cancer treatment, things can be a little bit different. And it may take time for your appetite to come back, especially if you're having side effects of treatment and still recovering from surgery. And as I kind of mentioned before, your medical team may advise you on your fibre intake, and they may ask you to limit your fibre. And, you know, that's fine, because usually it's sort of short term. And do go ahead and follow that advice. One thing that's important is not to forget about fluid, and we'll talk about that sort of more as the slides progress, because it's really good to stay hydrated. It helps with your bowels and helps with your stools to be easier to pass. So don't forget to include lots of fluid in your diet. And just a quick note about supplements. Generally, vitamin and mineral supplements are not needed unless they've been recommended for your doctor if there's been a deficiency, because you just need to be careful. And if you're buying anything over the counter, just make sure that you're not buying anything that's really high in the daily recommended allowance, because that can be dangerous and it's not needed. Okay, so thinking about our common bowel changes after bowel cancer treatment, how to manage those with diet. So these are the kind of common side effects that we're going to talk about, and how you can manage them, and how you can kind of adapt your diet to help manage those symptoms. So the first one is loose stools or diarrhea. And during this time, if you're having looser stools, it's really important to keep up with your fluid intake. You need to replace any lost fluids that you're losing in by going to the toilet. And it's also really important, if you have to drink fluid, but just do it slowly and gradually. Don't have like lots of fluid all at once, because that can kind of irritate the bowel as well. So have it small, regular amounts throughout the day. There are some things that can stimulate the bowel and kind of make it work a bit more, and kind of add to the feeling of the loose, add to loose stools. And these things are things like sweeteners that are found in foods and drinks, and in fizzy drinks or chewing gum, artificial sweeteners. Caffeine can also stimulate the bowel, so we recommend just having no more than 2 to 3 cups a day. Alcohol and fruit juice can also stimulate the bowel, so keep them to a minimum. And also just make sure that you discuss it with your medical team as well if you're really experiencing loose stools and it's becoming difficult to manage, because they can give you some support. Okay, next symptom that's quite common is frequent trips to the toilet, so going quite often and having that urgency, that increased need to go. And that it usually takes a bit of time for the bowel to settle down after treatment and surgery. So give it time, it should adjust after treatment. There are a few things that can kind of help in terms of your diet and lifestyle that can manage that bit better. One of the first thing is aiming for regular meals, because having food at sort of regular times like breakfast, lunch and dinner can really help to keep the bowel regular as well, and help you to go regular. It's also worth remembering about stress and anxiety, because that can really affect the gut and the bowel and can make you go to the toilet more often. And obviously after treatment and during treatment and after cancer, it can be a really stressful time and can be a very anxious time. So do look for ways to support it and dealing with those kind of feelings you're experiencing, because that may have a positive effect on your bowels as well, and do seek help and support with that. If you feel that there are sort of particular foods that may be exacerbating, like making the frequent trips to the toilet worse, or really causing you to go to the toilet more urgently, it might be useful to keep a food and symptom diary, and that could just be really simply just labeling down what you're eating, and then any symptoms that you're experiencing, and then you can show that to your medical team, or who can then give you some support and maybe refer you to a dietitian to get some more detailed support on how to manage that bit better. Constipation is the next topic, and this can affect people in different ways. So either making going to the toilet is just a bit harder, like harder stools to pass, or it's just longer time in between going to the toilet. And there are a few things that we can do in our diet to help us with managing those symptoms a bit better. One of the first things again is keeping up your fluid. So as I mentioned before, your fluid, having lots of good fluid in your diet, up to about 2 litres a day, helps to keep everything moist and passing through much easier. Regular meals is another one that's really important, because having those regular meals just means the gut, it knows when it's going to expect food to help to kind of form your stools and your poo better. So it's better to have regular meals. Having a bit more fibre in your diet can help, but the important thing is to check with your team that that's okay to do so. And if it is okay, just add it in really slowly. So just go gradually so that your stomach and your gut has time to get used to that. And you can just start really simply by just having an extra portion of vegetables, or just adding, like, changing to some whole grain or some slightly higher fibre options. As I said, just do it really slowly and make sure you're keeping up your fluid at the same time. Okay. And keeping up with gentle activity is really useful as well, because your gut is a muscle. So, by moving a little bit more can really help to kind of get that going again. So keep up with your gentle exercise, and even just sort of walking, just being a little bit more active, that might help. Another thing that may help is flax seeds. So they can be added to like cereals or yogurts, and they can have a really positive effect on when people are experiencing constipation. But check with your team that you're okay to include them in your diet. And these need to be done really slowly. So usually starting at sort of like half a teaspoon a day, building up gradually over a course of a few weeks. So do get advice from your dietitian or from your doctor if you want to pursue that option. Okay, wind and bloating is another thing that can be quite common after treatment and after surgery. And my number one top tip is really simple tip really, but it's number one top tip is to eat slowly and to chew really well, because eating really quickly can cause you to swallow lots of air, and that can really add to that feeling of bloating and wind. And sometimes you don't realise we're doing it until, if we're standing up and grabbing something to eat quickly, that's all eating much faster. But if we're sitting down and taking our time and being really conscious of chewing, it really helps with any kind of bloating or swallowing excess air. A few things that can help are, some people find peppermint tea is really helpful to kind of relieve bloating. You can just get herbal peppermint teas, are really good. Some oat-based foods are also quite useful to include. So there's a research that shows that oat-based foods can help with wind and bloating. So that could be just including some porridge oats, or maybe some oat biscuits into your diet. Linseed or flax seeds are also quite good for bloating and wind. And as I said before, if you're going to try that, just add maybe half a teaspoon or maybe some cereal or yogurt, and just slowly increase it over the course of a few weeks, up to no more than 1 tablespoon a day. And as I said, make sure that you get advice and you let your team know that you're doing that. A few things can stimulate the bowel to cause wind and bloating, such as your artificial sweeteners that you found in chewing gum, artificial chewing gum, sugar-free chewing gum, and fizzy drinks. And there are some particular foods that can, as below, that can increase feelings of wind and bloating, like sort of your cabbage or cauliflower, or onions and sweet corn and broccoli. But I would say don't restrict these unless you find them a problem, because we, as you saw from the beginning, want to include lots of different foods into our diet to make sure we're getting the best nutrition, and we don't want to restrict things unnecessarily. So if you find, that you're having problems with specific foods, then it's good to get advice on that further. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to talk a little bit about diet post-surgery. And I know that whilst everyone with bowel cancer may not have a stoma bag, I just thought it's a good idea to just include some general information for those of you that have had to have a stoma bag. So the first type of bag we have is the colostomy bag, which is where one part of the colon is brought out to the stomach, where your waste is collected into a stoma bag. And so usually after surgery, you're asked to start with a sort of slightly lower fibre diet, asked to cook vegetables and fruit a little bit more thoroughly, to just help your gut to kind of get used to that new after surgery. And then you are hopefully trying to progress back to just a normal usual diet. There should be no need to restrict anything. And as before, aiming for regular meals and lots of fluids each day. And also just keep up with trying lots of different foods, because initially you might be a bit cautious, but keep trying foods throughout to get back to that normal diet. And the stoma output should be fairly normalish, like normal stools, and not too loose. Ileostomy, so an ileostomy is where you have your part of your small bowel that's brought out to the stomach to collect waste material in a stoma bag. And because of the position of the bag, the output will be a little bit more watery and a bit more looser as you normally compared to a colostomy bag. And again, you'd need to start sort of after surgery, you'd start with a low fibre diet, and then you'd be getting advice from your medical team about introducing some higher fibre foods slowly back in. And this would be quite gradual as your gut is getting used to and your bowel's getting used to these changes. Again, we talked about some things that are really helpful is aiming for those regular meals. That's really important so that your stomach knows when it's going to get the food to help process it. Eating really slowly so that you're not swallowing lots of excess air and lots of excess air isn't collecting in the bag. Keeping up with your fluids. Avoid drinking with meals, so drinking outside of meals and drinking slow, small amounts frequently. And there may be some things to avoid here that may be a bit more difficult to pass into the ileostomy bag, such as food with sort of skins or sweet corn or nuts. Or celery, because they're a little bit harder to digest. So your team may ask you to avoid those. But the aim is ultimately, again, to get back to the healthy, balanced diet. So if you're struggling with what foods to eat or trying to get back into that normal diet, then do seek help and support with that. So common nutritional issues after bowel cancer, as well as those changes with the bowel, there can also be changes to weight. You can have experienced weight gain or weight loss and reduced appetite. So we're going to talk about this next. So reduced appetite and weight loss. So sometimes you can struggle with eating and appetite after or during cancer treatment, which can lead to weight loss. And these are my top tips of trying to get back into and helping to keep your weight stable. So aiming for small regular meals and snacks, because having smaller amounts are a bit easier to manage when your appetite is smaller. Going for those higher energy and protein foods. Maybe adding a little bit of the higher calorie foods like the butter or a bit of cheese if you can tolerate it, because you want everything that you eat to be higher in calories if you're not eating very much over the course of the day. Going for foods that you enjoy as well. Food is all about enjoyment, so getting that enjoyment back into eating and choosing things that you do like at the time. Not being afraid to have like nourishing and desserts, milky desserts or custards and cake, because those extra calories might be beneficial for you at that time where your appetite is not good and you've lost a bit of weight. It will just help to get your weight back. So it may feel like you're going against kind of healthy eating advice, but in this time when you've lost weight, it's really important to kind of get your weight back to being stable. And then also you might find that you might need a bit of extra support if you're not able to manage very well with eating, with supplement drinks. So your doctor or dietitian might prescribe you with some supplement drinks to have as a boost in addition to your food for a short period of time. As well as weight loss, some people can experience weight gain during cancer treatment, and this can happen for a number of reasons, like being less active due to feeling obviously very unwell and low energy levels. Some medications can make you feel a bit more hungry, so you might go for eating more higher calorie foods, or it might just be a way that you've managed with your side effects of treatment. So, that's, it's quite normal, quite understandable. And the first thing I would say is really give your body a chance to recover after treatment and take it slow. Don't be hard on yourself. It's okay that your weight changes. You've experienced a lot, so give yourself a chance to recover. And the important thing is not to make drastic changes. Like cutting out whole food groups. That's not that's not what we should be doing. But maybe just making a couple of healthy changes, like making sure your diet has a mixture of all those food groups you spoke about. and maybe just trying to look at the portion sizes again of what you're managing. And also getting active, you know, starting slow by just reducing the time you're sitting and then slowly kind of building up your activity level. I think they're going to be talking about that later as well, so you can find out a little bit more about that. But, you know, it can be just really simple, like walking around the house a bit more, or doing a bit of gardening or dancing, you know, think of things that you also enjoy. And that's really key to movement, is if you find something you enjoy, you're more likely to do it as well. So do look for things that you enjoy. Managing fatigue. So we really wanted to talk about fatigue because it's one of the top concerns actually during and after cancer treatment is fatigue. And if you're experiencing fatigue, and it can be from, you know, fatigue is like really extreme tiredness, or it can be just generally very low in energy. So if you're experiencing fatigue, I'd say it's really important to get some advice from your teams. They know that you're feeling this, and they can also just double check medically everything's okay. And because sometimes fatigue can be made worse if you're, say, anemic as well. That can happen. So do speak to your nurses and clinical nurse specialists and your doctors and ask them, you know, about these things if you're feeling really fatigued. In terms of diet, there are a few things we can just look at to make sure that we can kind of and optimize your energy levels, such as making sure that you're having enough energy, because you need enough energy to obviously to be able to do the activities in the day that you want to. So having your regular meals, and make sure you're having a mixture of all the food groups, and the carbohydrates, the proteins, the fruits and vegetables, and healthy fats. You know, aiming for something like a breakfast, lunch and dinner. And if you're feeling too tired, you know, just trying a small portion, but maybe just sneaking in a little snack in between that if you can't manage a full plate of food. In terms of cooking, you know, maybe if you're feeling really low in energy, not able to be cooking, you know, cook when you have energy, you know, batch cook a little bit more, put a portion in the freezer just so that you can save that for the days where you really are lower in energy. You know, make things easier for yourself as well, like use the chopped up or frozen vegetables just so they're easier, make preparation for cooking, you know, a bit easier for you. And ask for help as well, you know, ask for help from family or friends if they can bring something for you, you know, a meal that you can have in the freezer for those days, or a hot meal where you're really struggling with your energy levels. And then also keeping up with activity. And I know that feels like that might go against your instincts when you're feeling really tired, but actually having a bit of a good routine with having, you know, set times to wake up and to go to sleep, doing a bit of activity will just help to improve your fatigue levels as well as sort of having those good sleep routine. So these, here we go. These are our top tips for having a better night's sleep. And a lot of these things are things that we kind of know already, but sometimes you just need a bit of a check-in to see, oh, actually, I have been struggling with my sleep. Am I doing all these things to see if that can help? So as I said, sort of fix wake up and bedtimes, avoid watching TV in bed or on screens, because that can really stimulate the mind and that makes it harder to get to sleep. Keeping your sleeping environment comfortable, you know, not too hot, not too cold, really relaxing and unwinding before bed. So that just, you know, have a little set plan of what you do to help relax yourself, whether it be reading or having a nice bath or something, just so that your body knows actually when you start to do that, then, you know, now it's time to unwind and go to sleep. And also another couple of things is like keeping active in the day, you know, as much as possible helps to kind of get your natural rhythms ready for sleep at night. And getting some natural sunlight is shown to help actually to a little bit of sunlight every day helps kind of set those circadian rhythms. So it's quite good to get out if you can. And avoiding something like a large heavy meal close to bedtime as well, so that you're not kind of that, you know, because that makes you feel a bit more uncomfortable and less likely to sleep. Okay, so the last slide I wanted to discuss with you, just to touch on, is about reducing your risk for cancer and recurrence and prevention. So the World Cancer Research Fund are a big charity that looks at all the evidence available on diet and lifestyle and recommends, produces some guidelines for recommendations for us. And these are the things that that I've outlined here that are recommended for reducing your risk of bowel cancer and reoccurrence. So the first things are sort of eating your whole grains, if possible. If you're able to have and tolerate your whole grain things like your brown rice and pastas, then they're good to include because it helps to have a bit more fibre in your diet. And that's the same with your fruits and vegetables that give you your more fibre, and also some vitamins that are really, and other phytochemicals that are really helpful in cancer prevention. Red meat and processed meat is one that's often heard about. So the advice is to avoid processed meat, and processed meat we mean things like bacon, salami, ham, those sorts of processed meats. If you can avoid those, that's better. And red meat, the advice is to limit it to no more than 3 times a week. So you can still have it, but no more than 3 times a week. And try and replace it or swap it out with some sort of vegetable type protein meals, or fish or chicken or eggs. Trying to keep active is because that helps to kind of keep your weight stable, and also to just minimize alcohol as well, and try and aim for sort of alcohol-free days if possible. Okay. Great, so I'm quite happy to take some questions. I can see there were some questions.
Yes, Joanna, that was brilliant.
Lots of questions there, absolutely lots.
As always, you do get lots of questions coming in, so we'll plunge straight in. We'll start with one from Carolyn, who says, since surgery, I've become lactose intolerant. Okay. Is there a reason for that?
That can often happen when you've had some surgery to the gut, and it can be transient. It can be just for a short period of time, or it can be it can persist. So usually with lactose free, there's actually quite a lot of lactose free products out there. So you can get lactose free milks, you can get lactose free yogurts, and actually things like cheese are actually quite naturally low in lactose. So it depends. You might find that initially you're not able to tolerate much lactose, but as you sort of go on and recover, you might be able to have a little bit more lactose again. So probably good to try it, some sort of some normal sort of dairy products, and then see how you react. And then maybe that you might actually be able to have a level of tolerance. You might be able to have some of it in your diet.
Great. And we've got another question here. It's about somebody has said their mum has been diagnosed with stage 4 small bowel cancer. Okay. And she started chemo yesterday. The question is, one of the challenges is weight loss. And what would you recommend in terms of high calorific meals and snacks?
Yeah, it really depends on what they like, or what your mum likes as well, because that's really important. Going with things that she likes, and how much she's eating at the moment. Sometimes it's, as I said, just going for small portions, but frequently. So maybe having half portions of meals, but then having an extra snack in between. And anything that's high in calories, like sort of cheese or extra butter, like if you have soup, add in a little bit of grated cheese or a little dash of cream if you can tolerate that.
Cake.
Just so it adds a little bit, even just a little bit of cake is fine. Yep, definitely, just to keep the calories up. And do, keep an eye, because if it's she's really struggling, she might need some extra support from a dietitian or supplements just to help her during this time. So do reach out and get support sooner, as soon as you can, really.
Brilliant. And weight has been quite a recurring theme, I think, in the questions, Joanna. Somebody else has asked, I was at a healthy weight prior to my diagnosis. I lost weight, and I'm still not back to where I was before. Is that what I should be aiming for? Should I be aiming to get back to my pre-diagnosis weight?
It really depends on a number of things, really. So I would say it depends on how you're eating at the moment. If you're eating all your meals and eating a really good balance, then you know, it depends on that. If you're not, then you need to kind of work on getting back to that healthy routine and a healthy mix of foods. And also the most important thing is keeping your weight stable. Weight gain is really like weight loss. It takes, you know, if you're trying to lose weight as well, it takes time to lose weight. It's the same with weight gain. It takes time to gain back weight again, especially after you've had treatment or had surgery, where your body's still coping and working on all of those things that are going on. And that's kind of the priority, rather than sort of in your body, rather than focusing on keeping your weight. So if you can keep it stable, that's the first stage. And that's really good. That's really key. And then slowly you'll be able to sort of gain back the weight again. But it depends on like looking holistically at the whole picture really, of whether you would need to go back to that usual weight or not really.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. I know we've had a couple of questions about pulses from people who are vegetarian or not exclusively vegetarian, but used to eat a lot of vegetable pulses and beans, and now are avoiding those. And so, you know, people, if you have been relying on pulses, beans, lentils, that sort of thing in your diet, and now you're steering clear of them, what do you advise there?
That's really tricky, because obviously they're a really great source of protein for vegetarians and vegans is your pulses. It depends on why they're avoiding them, because if they've been told to avoid them, or if they cause a problem, it's looking at your diet and seeing if it's particular things that are causing particular types of pulses that are causing a problem for you, and then maybe obviously reducing those and looking at alternatives, or looking at the amount. So sometimes it's the quantity, it's too large, and that maybe you need to cut back on the quantity. But yeah, and then if you eat eggs, for example, or cheese, if you're not vegan, having those as your protein sources too would be a good idea in this short-term phase. But it really depends on you as an individual, and whether it's something that really causes your symptoms, or whether something you've been asked to avoid.
So it's trial and error with different types of pulses and portion sizes.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, because some people are more affected by, say, kidney beans compared to, say, chickpeas. They can manage chickpeas, say, as like, you know, ground up like hummus, but they can't manage them whole. It really kind of depends.
Give lots of things a try and see what works for you.
Yeah, and do it slowly. Exactly. Give it a try. And then also, you know, it depends on the reasons for avoiding these in the first place, but you know, it takes time for your gut to settle down and adjust. So initially you might find actually there's quite a few things that you can't manage. But if you kind of rest it and try it again, say a week later or 2 weeks later, you might find, oh, actually I can have a little bit of that. It's about slowly, gradually getting back to that healthy, normal diet that you had before.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so we've had a few questions coming in about vitamins, so I'm going to try and combine them.
Okay.
So quick fire vitamin round, if you will. So someone says, I've got high cholesterol and take statins, so therefore eat low fat or zero fat yogurt. Will they be still getting enough calcium from them?
Yes, so the calcium, those low fat products they should definitely be having calcium added to it. It's only the fat that they kind of reduce. I'd say just be careful if you're having dairy free, because I said like organic dairy free products don't have anything added to it, so you won't have calcium in that.
Right,
well.
Right. I think Jo said she was eating total, so
okay,
that's dairy.
Fine, yeah.
And then Sarah says, I've heard you can lose vitamin B12 or magnesium with an ileostomy over time. First of all, is that true? And then she says, I haven't been told to take supplements, but should I? And she then says she's vegan as well.
Okay. If you're vegan, then you are more risk of deficiencies of B vitamins, of the B12 vitamins. And actually the only way of checking is by having a blood test. So, you know, if you're concerned that you may be deficient, it'd be advisable to get a blood test out of your hospital with your GP, because then they can see what your levels are and then correct appropriately. Because it might be that you might need more than the over-the-counter supplement. You might need something in addition, like that, something stronger that a GP can prescribe, and it's best that they monitor that.
Great advice, thank you. I think we've really quickly got time for one really quick one.
Yeah, really quick one. Can you eat nuts with a colostomy stoma? That's a quick question.
With a colostomy stoma, you should be able to have just a normal diet again. It depends on the individual. So some people might find that they can't tolerate nuts, and some people they feel they can. So the best thing to do is just try a small amount and see how you are, and then monitor it for any symptoms. If it's okay, then you know you can have it. But if it's not, then maybe just don't try it just now and then try it again in a few weeks' time. It is quite trial and error with these things because our bodies are so personal and our tolerance is so personal to us.
Brilliant.
Should we do one very tiny?
Well, you can apologise to Darren.
Okay. Are probiotic drinks advisable or not to help with constipation? What do you think?
Sorry, I missed
Probiotic drinks.
Probiotics. So there are. This is a big long question. I'll try and be really quick. But
yeah, I'm sorry.
Probiotics. There's been a lot of research with probiotics and IBS symptoms. So constipation is one of them. And generally, some of the probiotics that you get in the shops don't have high enough amounts to kind of have that much of an effect. And if you are on active treatment, probiotics wouldn't be recommended as well because they're a live source of bacteria that could be a little bit risky to take. So I would say that it's a bit inconclusive whether it have an effect with the ones you can buy in the shops. There are probiotics that can help with constipation, but you'd have to do that under advice of, say, a dietitian that'd be able to kind of advise you.
You should definitely speak to your team before diving.
Definitely speak to your team, yeah, because they are live bacteria and it may not be suitable for you to have that.
Joanna, there's lots of comments in the chat saying thank you for such a wonderful presentation.
And lots of questions that we haven't had an opportunity to ask you. So we will be asking you afterwards, if that's okay, for answers, and we'll get those answers to people.
Yeah, no problem, definitely.
And just to say that Bowel Cancer UK does have an Eating Well booklet, which you can order in printed copy from our website, or you can download, which covers a lot of the things that Joanna has talked to us about. And the slides will be available to everybody afterwards. So Joanna, a huge thank you from all of us. And I know everybody watching, you're always an incredibly popular speaker. So it's lovely to have
you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Honor again today. Brilliant. Thanks, Joanna.
Thanks, Joanna.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.
Wow. Okay, so moving us forward, our next speaker is Dr. Darren Fernandes. Are you fiddling?
Oh yeah, I pressed the wrong button. Could you tell?
Yes,
like,
we were all a little bit confused.
Press the wrong button.
Our next speaker is Dr. Darren Fernandes, and Darren is a clinical research fellow in gastroenterology, and he's here to talk to us about managing changes in bowel function. So Darren, are you with us?
I am, yeah. Hi.
Brilliant. Hi,
Hey,
Darren. Lovely to see you again. Did you follow Joanna last time, or did Joanna follow you? I can't remember.
I believe she followed me last time. I started
so changing it up.
Very interesting.
We've done diet and eating well, and you're now dealing with what happens at the other end.
Yes, yeah.
Brilliant. Over to you.
Great. Well, thanks again for inviting me to speak. So I'm a clinical research fellow and I work alongside Professor Andreev, and we manage the side effects of cancer treatment to the bowel. So today I'm going to talk to you about some of the issues that you may develop following treatment and why this may be the case. I'm going to present to you some data from our specialist clinic at Lincoln and how this may translate to issues that you're having yourselves, and then go on to speak about some of the common conditions and how we diagnose and treat these before finishing with tips on how you can try to manage your symptoms yourself. So I think I've got a couple of questions just to poll. So if I can start off with the first poll, which is how many of you are having bowel problems following your treatment? And then the second is, if you do have problems, how many of you have been referred to a specialist for help? So I'll give you a few seconds to answer that, and then hopefully we can get the results coming through. Okay, if we can close the poll, then. So, the majority of you have suffered with bowel dysfunction, but unfortunately, it seems like the majority of you haven't been referred to a specialist, and sadly, that doesn't surprise me. But we'll go on to talk about that a bit later on. So, the number of patients living post a cancer diagnosis in England is increasing, and the same goes for colorectal cancer. So, as you can see from this graph, colorectal cancer accounts for the third largest number of patients living post a diagnosis. And this really equates to almost a reduction in 50% in mortality since the 70s, and more than doubling in survival rates over the past 40 years. And this is a result of improved screening programs and treatment. But as a result of this, we also have an increasing number of patients who will develop bowel dysfunction following their treatment too. And that's why it's important to be aware of this. Now, bowel cancer can affect any part of your colon, from your cecum to your sigmoid, and also affect your rectum. And depending on the location of the cancer, this dictates the treatment or surgery you may have. Now, this graph illustrates really well the different types of operations a patient may receive. Now, if you have a rectal cancer, typically you'd have an anterior resection, and alongside this, you'd receive chemo or radiotherapy. If you've had cancer in another part of your bowel, you'd normally have that section of bowel removed, and most likely have received chemotherapy alongside that too. And this is important because depending on the type of surgery or treatment you've had, this may influence the type of symptoms you later go on to develop. Now, in our clinic at Lincoln, we've seen a number of different patients who've had cancers in various sites of their bowel. Now, the majority have had rectal cancers, but I've also seen cancers in the sigmoid, transverse, ascending colon, and the cecum. And again, our patients have received a number of different treatments too. So majority have had surgery, but they've also had a combination of surgery, radiotherapy, and or chemotherapy. And when patients come to our clinic, we are not only interested in their bowel symptoms, but we also assess for other problems. So typically our patient cohort will also have issues with urinary or sexual dysfunction. They may have issues with their nerves, so what we call peripheral neuropathy. And I think Joanna also touched on this: fatigue, tiredness, depression. And if patients mention these things, we have means to refer them on to other specialists for help. We also investigate our patients using checklists. So we're very systematic in ensuring we rule out the most common causes for the bowel symptoms that they have. And when we treat patients, we treat them according to a flowchart. So none of our patients are guinea pigs, and we give them tried and tested therapies. And if one therapy doesn't work, we move on to our second line treatments. What's unique about our clinic is that we don't assess how patients have responded to our treatments ourselves. Rather, we get them to fill in a questionnaire when they're referred about their symptoms. And following treatment, we ask them to fill in the same questionnaire again. And this gives us a really objective understanding of how well they're responding to our therapies. Now, the majority of patients who have come to our clinic have a number of different symptoms, and it's likely you share a lot of these symptoms too. Most patients will have loose stool, bloating, urgency, and increased frequency, but other less common symptoms include incontinence, pain in the tummy and rectum, as well as discharge of mucus from the back passage. And typically, there are a number of reasons for why this occurs. Now, these are the most common diagnoses that we found in 29 patients who we've completed all investigations for. Now, one of the most common things we find is constipation. However, we also find other bowel problems, including bile acid malabsorption, pancreatic insufficiency, and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. And I'll talk about these four conditions in more detail in my later slides. Less common issues we see in our patients is radiation proctopathy. So if you've received radiotherapy as part of your treatment, this can cause changes to the lining of your bowel and make the blood vessels more fragile. This in turn leads to bleeding from your back passage, which in some cases may be quite severe, and patients need referral or intervention at a specialist centre. In a few of our patients, especially over the COVID pandemic, they've been drinking more alcohol because they've been staying at home. And this has a detrimental effect on the bowel, especially red wine. So one of the things I've suggested to my patients to do is to actually purchase a more expensive bottle of wine, because then they'd drink it more sparingly. Another issue we see in our patients is having too much fibre in their diet. Now, constipation. There are various causes for this. Firstly, it can be related to the amount of fibre you're having. Too little or too much can lead to it. Of course, when someone has gone through the treatments relating to bowel cancer, their physical activity reduces, and this in turn can also lead to constipation. The drugs that patients are given to treat some symptoms relating to treatment can also slow down the way the bowel works. This typically happens with opioids. So these are pain relief medications such as cocodamol, tramadol, or morphine. Loperamide, and often patients who are perceived to have diarrhea are mistakenly given loperamide, which actually, when in actual fact, they have constipation. And this in turn makes things worse. And iron tablets can also affect the way the bowel functions. Patients may also have had a history of constipation, which long precedes their cancer diagnosis. And this could relate to the fact that their pelvic floor muscles aren't working in synchrony, or there's slight dysfunction there. Now, these are some of the ways in which we treat our patients for constipation. The first is that all our patients get given a fibre quiz, so we can assess how much fibre they're having. Now, this is just a section of our fibre quiz, but depending on what foods patients are eating, they score points. Normally, we'd ask our patients to aim for about 10 points on the fibre quiz. If they're having more than this or less than this, then they're not having enough fibre. And just getting them to alter the amount of fibre they're having in their diet can significantly change the way their bowel functions. We'd also ask them to exercise more frequently. So again, we appreciate that patients aren't as active as they used to be, but rather if they're able to go for a short walk, that's really helpful each day, or if they're usually homebound or housebound, just to limit the amount of time they're sitting down or lying down will help. We also review our patients' medications. If we can try to stop some of the pain relief medications or reduce the doses, then we try to do that. We'd also try to stop medications like loperamide. This can often be difficult because patients feel it's the only thing that allows them to go out. And it's important that we break that cycle. We also advise patients on how to use the toilet and correct positioning. So we give patients an information leaflet like this on adopting the brace position. So normally when we sit on a toilet, we, in actual fact, are causing a kink in the muscles near to our rectum. And so when we do this, we are causing a barrier to passing stool out. And so we often need to strain. By adopting the brace position, so lifting our knees above our hips, we actually relax these muscles, and this in turn allows us to more easily pass a stool out. Now, patients or yourselves can adopt this position by using a simple footrest, although there are products on the market such as the Squatty Potty, which have a similar mechanism too. And finally, we also offer our patients laxatives, so bulk formers such as Normacol, stimulants such as Senna, and if necessary, we can give evacuants such as phosphate enemas or suppositories. Another common problem we see in our patients is bile acid malabsorption or bile acid diarrhea. Now, bile acids get released from your liver and gallbladder into your small bowel, and here they help to digest fat. Any bile acids that aren't used in this process normally get reabsorbed in the last part of your small intestine or the right side of your colon. In patients who've had radiotherapy, this can cause scarring or what we call fibrosis. And so this affects the lining of the small bowel and thus affects the reabsorption of the bile acids. Chemotherapy can also cause swelling or inflammation in the lining of the bowel. And again, this affects reabsorption. And in patients who've had a right hemicolectomy, so had the right side of their bowel removed, this will also impact on the reabsorption of bile acids. And so rather than bile acids getting reabsorbed and sent back to the gallbladder and liver to be used again, what actually happens is that they will travel through to the rest of your colon. And as a result of this, water gets drawn out. Now, patients may then suffer with a number of different symptoms. And this includes incontinence or soiling accidents, bloating, watery and loose stools, having urgency, and also nocturnal symptoms, so often needing to get up at nighttime to go to the toilet. Now, thankfully, it's fairly simple and straightforward to diagnose bilateral malabsorption. And in most hospitals, we have a specialized scanner called a CCAT scan. Now, patients are given a radioactive tablet to swallow. And again, the radiation doesn't last for very long and won't cause you any harm. But we get patients to have a picture taken on the first day in which they take the capsule. And that tells us how much of it is present in their body. And then we bring them back 7 days later and rescan them. And this gives us a retention rate of what's left. Now, if they've got mild bile acid malabsorption, it's enough to just restrict the amount of fat that they're having in their diet, because patients with bile acid malabsorption are very sensitive to fat. And so this will trigger symptoms. However, if they've got severe bile acid malabsorption, then alongside a fat restricted diet, we also need to start them on bile acid sequestrants. And these are typically cholestyramine, which is a sachet, a powder sachet, or cholecevlan, which is a tablet. Now, this has a dramatic effect and improvement on patients' symptoms. So we've had patients who go 7 or 8 times a day, and then post-diagnosis and treatment go 2 or 3 times a day to open their bowels and have formed stools. Occasionally, patients may actually go completely the other way and suffer with constipation. And this isn't an unusual side effect. However, we'd advise our patients not to make the mistake of reducing their bile acid sequestrant, because actually what then happens is we're not treating the bile acid malabsorption adequately, and patients will continue to have breakthrough symptoms. So if you are a patient who's been given a bile acid sequestrant and gone on to develop constipation, rather than reduce the dose, you should be started on a laxative. And the normal one we give, again, is Normacol. Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, is also another condition we see in our patients. Now, our bowel is full of bacteria, and this helps to break down food. Generally, our small intestine has a smaller number of bacteria compared to our large intestine. However, when patients receive radiotherapy, again, as a result of the scarring, there is less movement of fluid and bacteria through the gut. And this stagnation allows certain bacteria to overgrow in the small bowel. Chemotherapy can also dampen down the immune system and thus allow certain bacteria to thrive over others. And also, normally in our bowel, between the small intestine here and the large intestine here is a small valve. This valve prevents the flow of bacteria from the large bowel to your small bowel. However, if you've had a right hemicolectomy, so again, your right bowel removed, this valve is distorted or disrupted, and there's free movement of bacteria between your large intestine and small bowel. And so again, there'll be a large number of bacteria in your small intestine. And also, if you've had frequent courses of antibiotics, again, this will disrupt the bacteria environment in your gut too. And typically, patients with SIBO will have a number of different symptoms. They will have abdominal pain, diarrhea, fever, they may feel sick or vomit, and they generally just feel awful. And often when they go to see a specialist, they're diagnosed as having IBS, which of course isn't the case. Now, there is a test that we can do to try to look for SIBO, and this is a methane or hydrogen breath test. And essentially what we get our patients to do is to swallow a sugary drink and then provide us with some breath samples at certain time points. We then measure how much gas is produced, and if there are high levels of certain gases, then this would be suggestive of SIBO. If patients are found to have a positive test, we treat them with antibiotics. And this is a really effective treatment. So one of my patients who was given antibiotics, it completely changed the way she functioned. So from being at home and not being able to go out, she was able to socialize more, and she even joined Slimming World. Unfortunately, because we're not treating the underlying cause, which is leading to the SIBO, so for example, damage from radiotherapy or the changes from surgery, bacteria are likely to regrow. And so patients may need repeated treatment several months later, or they may need rotating courses of antibiotics every few months to prevent resistance. The final condition I'm going to talk to you about is pancreatic insufficiency. Now, in a normal pancreas, enzymes are released, or fluid, to help digest our food, and then this is later absorbed in our bowel. Now, in some patients, there is a predisposition to developing what we call pancreatic insufficiency, so essentially not having enough of these enzymes released. So if you're a patient with diabetes and it's not well controlled, then this can affect the way the pancreas works. If you're someone who drinks quite a lot of alcohol, again, this can later on over time lead to affect how the pancreas works. But in addition to this, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and surgery all can affect the way the pancreas works. And so less of these juices and enzymes are released. And as a result, patients will have symptoms including bloating and wind, loose stool, increased bowel movements, and urgency. Now, again, it's a fairly simple test to perform to diagnose this condition, and it's a stool test called a fecal elastase. Most GP practices and surgery should be able to do this. The only caveat is that if you're a person who has really loose and watery stools, this may give us an artificially low result and may therefore not be as conclusive. Nonetheless, in our patients, we would give them treatment with pancreatic supplements. So these essentially mimic what the pancreas is doing, and they contain the enzymes to break down food. And this, again, is a really effective treatment. We'd also advise dietary modification, so eating less fats and reducing alcohol intake. Some of the other ways in which you can manage some of the symptoms is firstly to perform regular pelvic floor exercises. So again, with the operations and treatments that you've gone through, this can weaken the pelvic floor muscles. And by performing regular pelvic floor exercises, we're strengthening these muscles, which in turn allows you to hopefully pass the stool much better. A lot of my patients who I see in clinic often don't go out because they are concerned about needing to go to the toilet. Thankfully, there are apps like Toilet Finder that allow us to plan ahead. And so it gives you a bit more confidence knowing that if you did need to go to the toilet in a short space of time or at short notice, you could find one close by. There's also the radar key that's available to purchase from most chemists and drugstores. And this is a universal key that gives you access to most public toilets. Finally, if you're going on a long journey, it may be helpful to take a change of clothes, a wash kit, or sanitary pads, just in case you get caught short. However, and I think from what our poll has shown at the beginning, is that the most important thing you can do for yourselves is to seek specialist help. So that's all I'd like to speak to you today. Thank you for your time.
Darren, thank you.
Thank you for that. Wow, so much in there.
Definitely. And we have had some questions. I'm going to start where you've just left off, actually, about seeking specialist help. So a question that we know a lot of people often ask is, how long do you leave it before you ask to be referred to a gastroenterologist? Sort of what's a normal settling down period?
Yeah, so I think typically in the patients that we see, we would expect them to have a change in their bowel function for up to 3 months before we'd consider things to be where we'd expect them to have settled. So after a period of 3 months, if patients are still having symptoms or problems, we'd ask for referrals onto us so we could investigate that in more detail.
Great, that's really helpful, isn't it? Just to have a sort of guide to work to.
Yeah. So we've had a couple of other questions. Somebody's saying, I'm finding regaining bowel control to be psychologically challenging. Do you have any advice on that? How, I completely get that. If you've had, that surgery, things haven't settled down and it's causing you anxiety, that's presumably going to make things more difficult, isn't it, Darren?
Of course, yeah. And it's something, as I mentioned, a lot of my patients do struggle with. Now, firstly, hopefully from the talk that I've given, there are a number of reasons for why patients have bowel dysfunction. And if someone hasn't been investigated for these common causes, the first thing I'd urge is that they are seen by a specialist to look for this, because just by treating this in itself, we are able to improve symptoms so dramatically, and that's enough to give patients confidence. Of course, occasionally we can't make that much of a difference, unfortunately, and that's where we would seek help from psychologists to see if we could try to help in that side of things.
So you can be referred on to somebody who could help.
Yes, yeah, and also there are some other measures that, as I've explained, that one can do to give them a bit more confidence, such as using the toilet finder app or taking a change of clothes. But again, that can be quite distressing for patients when they're going on long distance journeys.
Yeah.
And we've got Dr. Helen talking to us a bit after the lunch break, actually, about the emotional impact and psychological impact of bowel cancer. So that might come back up then. We've had a question from Joe, Darren, who says, how soon after surgery for low anterior resection surgery should I be practicing my pelvic floor exercises? And at that point, I know everyone squeeze. Because you say pelvic floor and that's what you do.
It is.
Yeah, I think, again, after a month or so after the surgery, scars have healed, usually you'd have a follow-up appointment with your surgeon or colorectal cancer nurse specialist. And I think if everything's healing well, then you can start to do light exercises. So usually that's after 4 to 6 weeks.
Great.
That's good to know. Really good to know. We've got a question, a quick one, about the fibre quiz. Is it available online?
So I believe it is. It was something devised by Professor Andreev when he was at the Royal Marsden. So I think it is available on Google, but I would have to check with him.
Okay, we will send it round if it is to everybody.
Yes, we will. We'll have a little Google, won't
yes,
we?
it definitely provoked a little bit of discussion here when we went, oh,
yeah,
not sure I'm having enough for breakfast.
Yeah, exactly.
Darren, I think that's the end of all the questions that we've had. So a huge thank you. Oh no, hang on, another one has just come in. I don't want to.
Oh yeah.
Right. Oh, hang on, it's a complicated one.
It's from Jennifer.
It's from Jennifer. So if you have had a right hemicolectomy and you then start chemo, how long should you leave it before seeking help with urgency, abdominal pain and diarrhea, as the chemo could be causing the issues, I guess?
Yeah, so again, at the time of chemotherapy, if the symptoms are really severe, normally an oncologist would refer on to us for our advice and opinion, and we'd look for some of the issues that I've talked about, so bilateral malabsorption or SIBO, because they're typically the reasons for why patients develop diarrhea. If it's mild or something that's manageable, again, this is most likely just related to the chemotherapy, and with time that should settle. But if the symptoms continue after completion of treatment and it's going on for 2 months or longer, and it's really impacting on the way someone functions, then I would seek help.
Great. Thank you. And I can
see
see that, yes, I can see that Hayley's put in the chat that Bowel Cancer UK have a booklet around regaining bowel control. So Hayley's put the links to that. Darren, as always, just lovely to see you and a pleasure to listen to your talk. You've set everybody up brilliantly for lunch. talk of poo, and now we have a break, which is down as lunch, but I'm hoping everybody will be able to manage. So a massive thank you from all of us, Darren, for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
the rest of your Saturday.
And same to you. Thank you.
And everybody who's with us watching, we now have a break. It's a break till 12:40, I believe. So time to nip off and get a cup of tea, or I don't know, expensive red wine, I think, as Darren was advocating.
Expensive red wine with a nice wholemeal sandwich.
And a massive slab of chicken, because I don't know about you, but that slide that Joanna put up with that massive chunk, I'd be a bit intimidated by that much chicken, I think.
I think you'd have to spread it out over the day, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So whatever it is that you're reaching for now, enjoy it, stretch your legs, and we will see you back here at 20 to 1.
Lovely. See you soon, everyone.
Hello and welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone.
Hopefully everybody managed to stretch their legs, have some refreshment, get some fresh air maybe.
Exactly, a bit of sunshine. There's
Yes.
a little bit of sunshine.
Yeah, a little
going
bit.
on
It's
today.
trying here. And hopefully everybody's made it back.
Hope so, yeah. But of course, we are recording this. So if you did miss a bit of it, then it'll be on YouTube in the next few days, won't it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we'll have it on YouTube. So anything you want to watch back again, I know lots of you put, you know, that you're finding these presentations really helpful. So if you can always check back, which is the lovely thing about this.
Yes. In fact, we checked this morning back to last year's by going onto YouTube, finding this event last year.
Exactly.
And check something.
Exactly. So we're really excited about this afternoon. We know the rest of the program actually, because we've got joining us next and to talk about coping with the emotional impact of a cancer diagnosis. And we mentioned this before the break, didn't we? We've got Dr. Helen Galliard. Now, Dr. Helen Galliard is an HCPC registered clinical psychologist, currently working for Maggie's Cancer Care in Forth Valley, Scotland. Was it today?
Yes, we could have stayed.
Yeah.
You should have come for a cup of tea.
Yes.
If only I'd known. I was all over. I was in Edinburgh and Dundee and Glasgow. It was lovely. Next time I'll pop in. Without further ado, I'm just going to, Helen, I'm going to let you take it away.
Fantastic. I'm so sorry. I just interrupted your beautiful introduction.
Oh.
But
Well, yes, I was going to say that, you know, obviously you've done so much, because before you were at Maggie's, you worked for NHS Fife in a clinical health speciality service, didn't you? Supporting people with pain and weight management. And we've talked a little bit about that this morning.
And teach yoga. I don't know how you find the time.
well, maybe it's because of all of the yoga. So shall I start then? I'm hoping I'm just
over to you.
I'm going to check with my slide. Here we go. Yes, okay, fantastic. So it's really, really lovely to be here this afternoon, and I'm coming from a very sunny Edinburgh today, which is quite unusual. We were told we'd have snow this week, so we'll see what happens. So as the guys were saying, I'm a clinical psychologist and I currently work for Maggie's Cancer Care, and you can see there's a wee QR code down there if you want to go and have a look at the Maggie's website. And we are a charity that provides support for people with all different kinds of cancers, including bowel cancer. and we provide one-to-one support, benefits, advice. All of our cancer specialists are nurse trained, and each Maggie's has got a psychologist and sometimes even 2 psychologists. So, and we work very closely with the NHS. And what I want to do today is really to talk a little bit about the emotional impact of having a cancer diagnosis, and then really importantly, having a look at some practical things that you can do, whether or not you're somebody who's impacted on directly by bowel cancer, or if you're a carer or friend of somebody who has that diagnosis. So to start off with that, what we're going to do is we're going to try a little bit of technological magic here. So we are going to use a Menti poll asking the question, what is the psychological impact of bowel cancer on your life? And that may be from your own personal perspective or as a carer. So what you can do is, I'm hoping that in the chat, somebody has posted the link, or you can use the QR code, or if you go to menti.com, you can put in the code 32677208. And then what I'm hoping is Richard is going to be able to share this as you're putting in your responses. So we should have a really lovely word cloud coming up. So as you put in your responses, what will happen, hopefully in a little while, is we'll start seeing some of the responses that you've put in. So there's some coming up there, and it's interesting as these come up, what you'll notice is the ones that are bigger and bolder are the ones that have maybe been put in more than once. And we can see that there are some things here that are very much related to the emotional impact. So the word overwhelming, devastated, life-changing. And I can see some of these other responses around worry about the future, concern about loss. Somebody's put the word sucks there, which I like. I think sometimes, you know, that's absolutely the experience. And particularly at the beginning of somebody's journey, you know, there might be an awful lot of different kinds of emotions coming up. And I'll just give you all a little bit of time just to have a look at this as it comes up. And it may be that you relate to some of these. It's also really helpful to see that it's not just you who are experiencing some of these concerns, that actually this is a really common experience, that people can feel quite overwhelmed by something that is quite life-changing. So I think we'll move on back to the slides, if that's okay, Richard. So thank you so much for getting involved in that. And it's always really interesting to see the word clouds as they come up. And from your responses, what we hear a lot at Maggie's, particularly when people first get a diagnosis, is that they describe the impact as a bit like, if you imagine a jigsaw that's all nice and neat and all the pieces are in place, it's almost as if somebody's coming along and they're weaking the table up. There's a good Scottish word for you. Weaking the table up, and all the pieces go up in the air. And that was very much represented in what you were saying in the word cloud there. And really, you know, our job at Maggie's and other organisations like Bowel Cancer UK, we're here to support you to try and help to put some of these pieces back together. And what we know from this experience of having a cancer diagnosis is that there's often lots of transition and a constant juggle of normal, natural emotions. But, you know, as we can see, they're not always pleasant. Sometimes they suck. And so what I've put here are some of the common different kinds of emotions that might come up. And these are often very related into this sense of loss that we might have. And that might be a loss for a future that we imagined, or it might be a loss of, you know, some of the physical elements of what comes along with a cancer diagnosis. So we can think about anger, some despair, that sense of terror. And a lot of people, when they get a diagnosis, will come and say, you know, my first thought is, I'm going to die. And we have a lot of conversations around that fear at Maggie's. And we're going to talk about what we might do if we're feeling like that, and that those feelings of insecurity and uncertainty. And we're having to try and get used to a new world. And that can sometimes be really challenging, because often when we're learning to adapt, that can feel uncomfortable. And for some people, it might be that they feel this sense of shock or numbness. So everything is often intensified. And what we've got in these probably quite hard to see bubbles here is we've got some things that often people tell us are really intensified. And this is borne out by a lot of the research about the impact of a cancer diagnosis. And there are some things here that came up in that word cloud. So thinking about, you know, a lack of control, that's a really big issue for a lot of people that I work with. It may be that changes our role, it impacts on our emotional well-being and maybe our relationships. It might make us question some of our beliefs around spirituality and religion if we have faith. And then obviously we have some of the physical impact of cancer and treatment and the practical aspects of daily life. And so this is normal. It's normal for people with cancer and their families to really experience some of these challenges. Although I can't see you, you know, I wonder if some of you are nodding along, given your responses earlier on. So we can feel swept away and driven by, over time, maybe some patterns of unhelpful thinking, some patterns of overwhelming emotions, or even difficult physical sensations, particularly when we're thinking about anxiety and that fight or flight response, that rush of adrenaline that we get, that might include a high heart rate. It may be that we feel on edge. And sometimes during our cancer journey, we might ricochet back and forward. And if we're feeling like this, and not everybody does, but for those of us who do feel like that, what can we do to manage? And this is the important stuff that, you know, what actually can we be in control of? And this idea of self-management is really important all across the journey. At Maggie's, we've just started running prehabilitation or getting ready for treatment sessions. And we talk a lot about, even in these situations when we feel like we are out of control, actually there's a lot that we can do to help ourselves. So I'm going to talk about how we can reach out, how we can pause, maybe open to that transition, maybe foster routines, and sometimes that can be challenging. And we're going to talk very briefly about gratitude. And then I want to end my session with a little bit of a self-compassion practice. So hopefully we'll have a nice bit of time to do that. So reaching out is something that I thought was really important. And actually for all of you who have logged in, I think these kinds of sessions are really helpful because we can reach out in lots of different ways. Sometimes the thought of speaking to somebody can be really overwhelming. And that's particularly if we're talking about feelings that are really overwhelming, if we're worried about death and dying, if we're worried about what does cancer diagnosis mean for my life, then that is really difficult. And one of the things that I think has come maybe particularly over the pandemic is that actually our digital resources have been just expanding all over the place. And I know Bowel Cancer UK have got some really brilliant forums and ways of getting support that doesn't necessarily mean you have to speak to somebody. You know, you can reach out to get support by looking at resources online, by emailing, by texting. And I know that that's what a lot of people do at Maggie's, and they will do for Bowel Cancer UK. But there's also organisations like the Samaritans, who, you know, the traditional way is phoning them, but they also have a texting service and an email service. And I think it's really helpful to use all of these resources, because there's a wealth of support and information out there. But let's not forget all the family and friends who are around as well, because they are a source of support. However, I know that sometimes for the people that I'm working with, they need a bit more support, and they want to talk to somebody who maybe isn't so linked to them, and maybe they're trying to protect other people in their life. And that's why a referral to a psychologist or counselling services can be really helpful. And at Maggie's, we're lucky that we can usually see people quite quickly, but there's also NHS resources around mental health. So all of these things are there to support you. So the other thing that I think is super helpful, and this might seem so simple, but it's really, really useful, this idea of, can we take a pause? And that can be really challenging, particularly if we're having that fight or flight, if we're feeling really anxious. And I often talk to the people that I work with, either one-to-one or in groups, that very simple strategies like breathing can be really, really helpful. Maybe this comes from, you know, my yoga teaching, that very simple breathing strategies can be incredibly helpful in calming us down and giving us literally some breathing space. So there are things like, you know, different strategies. There are things like rectangular breathing, where you breathe like a square. So I'm going to demonstrate this. So you might inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And even just counting your breath. So counting up to 2 on an inhale and 2 on the exhale can really help slow us down. And what I'm going to do after my talk is I'm going to pop a wee YouTube playlist in the chat with lots of different resources that will lead you through breathing exercises, looking at some of these other strategies that I've mentioned here. The one at the end there is called Sitting Like a Mountain, and that's a mindfulness exercise. And mindfulness is very helpful when we're feeling overwhelmed. And of course, there's lots of different kinds of apps. I've mentioned a few there that can be really helpful. And Calm have got some really brilliant resources on YouTube as well that are free. You can subscribe to some of these, and there's a payment, but you don't need to do that. There's an awful lot of resources that are available for free, and we can use those. So when we think about opening to change, I think one of the things that's really helpful to think about is this idea that actually, if we're starting to struggle with our difficult thoughts and our difficult feelings, unfortunately, that can actually make us feel worse. So I don't know if you've ever seen a finger trap. So it's like a piece of paper that you put your fingers in, and the more you pull, the more stuck your fingers get. And that just shows that the more we struggle, then the more we can feel worse. And this is why strategies like mindfulness can be really helpful in opening up to the experiences that we're having and helping us to learn that our emotions come and go, a bit like the weather, particularly in Scotland, where we can have 4 seasons in one day. So when we're thinking about routine, I was using that idea of the jigsaw. And when we feel like everything's up in the air and things are difficult, maintaining any kind of routine can be really, really helpful. And this is particularly helpful if we're struggling with things like sleep difficulties. And oh, I've got a cat joining me, so I don't know if the cat's on screen. So hello, I hope you're not going to jump on my computer. You're going to go down.
Which one, Helen? Which one?
This is Attila. So
Oh,
green debut. So I've got 2 cats. I've got Attila and Genghis. And
oh, lovely to meet you, Attila.
You said that would happen, didn't you?
I thought it might, yeah. I was saying to the girls earlier on, I might try and shut the door, but then they said, oh, he's going to come and sit on me, so that's fine. Actually, pets are very helpful when we're thinking about, so he's joining me here. So best laid plans. Okay, so Attila's sitting on me here. So thinking about routine then, particularly when we're thinking about things like managing sleep, and that can be a real difficulty when our routines are changing, if we're having to get involved in some of the challenges around treatment. What's really important in terms of sleep management is actually having a routine. And Dr. Colin Espy, who works in Oxford, he recommends that if you're going to do one thing around sleep, that is to set a getting up time and to stick to it every day. And that is difficult, particularly when you're feeling overwhelmed, but that one thing can be really helpful. And I think the other thing is about doing things that are meaningful to you. And that might look like all sorts of things. It might be that you're really into yoga like I am, or it might be that you're creative, or it might be that you enjoy exercise. And although those things might look a little bit different when you're going through treatment, it's important to do them even in a tiny way. And I know I have people that I work with who love exercise, and what they've done is they've adapted that and they've paced themselves. So maybe they've gone from doing high intensity interval training to doing something like Tai Chi or some gentle yoga. And these things are really helpful, and you can do them sitting. And again, I will give you a wee YouTube playlist that will help with that. So Attila's getting in the way here, bless him. I think he's trying to help. So when we're thinking about gratitude, I think it's something that is talked about a lot. You might have heard about the idea of keeping gratitude diaries, or thinking about, you know, what you're thankful for, even in very difficult circumstances. So I think part of this is really, really important, and it's actually about self-compassion and acknowledging that you're going through something that's very, very difficult, and that actually it's really important to pay attention to being kind to yourself, particularly when things are difficult, when your routines might have changed significantly. And so when we're thinking about this, there's lots of different practices that we can do that help encourage us to be grateful for what is around, and for our own resources. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to invite you to participate in a kind hand exercise. So I have provided this in the slides, and I'm going to move Attila. So you're going to go down there, young man. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you to have a go at this exercise with me. You don't have to participate, it's entirely optional. And if you're not participating, maybe you can just spend the next few minutes just breathing and maybe just listening along. So this is an exercise that is really helpful if we're feeling tense, if we're having a busy mind, if we're finding it really difficult. And I think it's gone up there. This is me having to show kindness to myself in unexpected circumstances. So showing kindness to ourselves through the power of our own touch is actually a really evidence-based way of reducing stress, and it's quite an important way of giving care to ourselves. And it may be that you can think here about how we touch children, or maybe other people in our lives, maybe with a hug. So I'm going to invite you to find a quiet space and make yourself really comfortable. So sitting upright, but relaxed and calm. And maybe just starting to take a few slow breaths. And maybe starting to notice how you feel in your body right now. You might notice physical sensations, you might notice thoughts. You might even notice some feelings that have come up as I've been talking. And we're not trying to change this, we're just noticing them and letting them come and go. I'm going to invite you to pick one of your hands and imagine that it's the hand of someone that you love, someone who leaves you feeling good about yourself, cared for and understood. It might be somebody from your distant past, like a grandparent, somebody who's in your life now, or even somebody who you imagine would be really kind and caring. And allow your hand to be filled with the feelings that you have when you're either with this person or imagining that you're with them. I'm going to invite you to place that hand slowly and gently on a part of your body where the feelings and physical sensations are the most intense. Or you might place your hand on your heart. And just allow that kind hand to rest on your body with no need to force. Just feeling the hand on your skin. Maybe noticing the warmth of the hand. And allowing yourself to open to this gentle action of self-compassion. And after doing that, I'm going to invite you to take the hand down and just come back into the space where you are. And maybe notice how you felt while you were doing that, or while you were hearing me talk through that exercise. And sometimes we might have thoughts around, oh my goodness, this is difficult, or it feels a bit woolly. But these kinds of exercises are really helpful in calming us down and working towards self-compassion. And it's a difficult thing to do. It's easy to talk about, but difficult to do. But I hope maybe there was a wee moment there where actually you felt calmed. So I just want to say thank you. That's my time up. Gosh, it's gone so quickly. And I've got my email address there if anybody wants to get in touch or has any questions, and the Maggie's site there as well. And I apologise for my feline interruption, but bless him, he likes a mindfulness exercise.
Absolutely, don't apologise. We enjoyed him. We enjoyed his appearance.
We're so used to seeing pets popping up on Zoom and things.
We love it. So we have got a couple of questions for you. So we've got one question here, which is around how can I best communicate with my support circle that I'm still feeling really emotional after treatment, but they sort of think I should have moved on?
This is such an interesting question. And so at Maggie's, we run a group called Where Now, which is for people who've just completed treatment. And this is a really common thing because people post-treatment, often friends and family, are like, well, you should be back to normal, whatever that is. And I think, you know, coming along to groups like that can be very helpful in talking about it. It's a really common experience. And it's part of that challenge, isn't it, of saying to our nearest and dearest, actually, this is a really big, difficult thing that's happened. And, you know, just it's difficult sometimes to remind them that actually it's had an impact. But I think it's really helpful to have those conversations and to know that it's normal. It's normal to have those feelings. So that would be my advice. And I think, you know, seek support, like I was saying. I think what I know from the groups we run at Maggie's is it's really helpful to hear from other people in the same situation. And although I can talk about, you know, what I know as a psychologist, is something really powerful about hearing from other people who are in a similar situation. And it's a really common thing that comes up.
That's great. Thank you.
And it's something that we hear as well, isn't it? And, you know, we run our online peer support groups called Chat Together. And, you know, people who've done them, there's a quote from somebody who took part in a recent one, he said, you feel you're not on your own. Others understand your problems and worries, and the support is wonderful. And I think it's so important, isn't it? Because going through bowel cancer treatment can be a very lonely thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's that embarrassment factor as well, because if you're having to get used to talking about poo and bowels and all of that, it can just be so difficult. And certainly we have groups, support groups, where people come and talk about some of these things quite candidly, which is quite an eye-opener actually. And you know, it's something to get comfortable with, I think, and you can do that through these kinds of supports. Yeah.
We've had somebody come through, a couple of things. One, they've said the kind hands exercise made their eyes water because they were thinking about somebody who died before their diagnosis. So I'm just going to say to whoever that anonymous person is, me too. I lost both my parents last year, and my eye was leaking a little bit. Nothing wrong with that. But they also ask, Helen, have you got any tips when you can't stop thinking about that worst case scenario, when that's the only thought that you've got? Any tips for stopping that?
Waking you up in the night.
Yeah, so there are quite a lot of things I could say about that, but the headline is that techniques like relaxation and mindfulness can be invaluable when we're finding that we're going down a rabbit hole of really difficult thoughts. And I think the thing to know about relaxation and mindfulness is it takes practice. You know, link into mindfulness groups. There's lots of them around that are running online. Use things like YouTube and good quality resources. And I'll post some YouTube links, because the internet's got lots of really good stuff. It's also got lots of not so good stuff. I want to make sure that people get good quality resources, but learning strategies like that over time will really help when we notice we're getting hooked in, particularly to those really, you know, fear-inducing thoughts. And I think particularly if you're someone who's been bereaved, if you're someone who's going through treatment, these are really helpful strategies to learn how to use. And it's a skill, you know, so it's like learning to ride a bike. You have to practice. Practice makes perfect. Yeah.
That's really interesting, because, you know, looking for tips for starting something like that, you know, if it's not something that you're naturally able to do, you might think it's not for you, but actually what you're saying is over time you can teach yourself to do this.
Absolutely. And a lot of people, when they come to things like relaxation or mindfulness, think if they try it once and it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But I spend a lot of time you know, saying to people, it is a skill. You do have to keep at it. And I often share that when I started mindfulness, I absolutely hated it. I thought it was awful. I had a very strong response to it, but I've persevered with it over the last 15 years. And I still have days where I'm having a busy mind and it's difficult, but it's all about training your attention to notice those thoughts and then come back to, you know, it might be breathing, it might be sound, it might be a cat, it could be any number of things. And it's a skill to be learned. And we're very lucky that we have access to lots of different ways of learning these skills, be it online or be it a local mindfulness group, or, you know, Maggie's centres, if you have one near you, offer mindfulness routinely.
So thank you. I think you said you were going to post some links for us, which will really help if people are really interested in this. And you know, sometimes it can be linked to a physical activity, can't it? Where you are absolutely like yoga, actually, where you're in the moment and you can't really, your mind can't really go in 100 different directions.
Absolutely. And I think the thing with relaxation and mindfulness is there are so many different strategies and techniques out there. You have to find the one that works for you. And one of the reasons that I really love yoga is that it's mindfulness in action. It's meditative. You're synchronizing your breath and your movement. And you can do that in lots of different ways, not just through yoga. You can do it with mindful walking. You can do it, you know, with things like Tai Chi. And I've got some resources which I will post. That I have a YouTube channel. It's not me talking. It's just lots of playlists around some of this stuff. So I'll post that in the chat.
Brilliant, thank you. We just got a comment in the Q&A here from Jo, who said that she felt very emotional doing the hand technique, but when I put my hand on my heart, it really did help me to feel calmer. Definitely going to practice this more often. Thank you.
Good. I'm so glad. Thank you, Jo. Yeah.
And we just have one more question, and this is something that so I asked Darren earlier, how long do you expect normal disruption to your bowel function, and then at what point, when do you know that you need some help? And I guess I'm going to ask you the same question. Yeah, there's a period of time, isn't there, after a cancer diagnosis where you expect your emotions, I imagine, to be, you know, all over the place and things to be different, but how long do you leave it before you realize, actually, I need some support with this?
So there are different ways of answering this question. Psychologists never answer anything directly. So what I'm going to say is, if you're feeling overwhelmed at any point, I think get some support. I would say if that is persisting for 3 months or longer, I think that tells you that perhaps this is becoming a persistent difficulty. I think if it's 6 months or more, then again, that's another indicator that this is something that you need to get a bit of support for. I think often, unfortunately, there still can be a stigma around mental health challenges, but, you know, use the resources that are out there. And if you're able to speak to a counsellor or a psychologist or, you know, a supportive person within your medical team, then do that. So 3 months seems to be the number, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? The magic 3 months.
Yeah,
It does. Yeah.
Helen, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
I know, it's a really practical coping strategies,
Yes.
as well as that the recognition that this is normal. This is how, you know, you're going to go through this, but there's help and you don't have to do it on your own.
Absolutely.
I mean, talking of which, actually, we've got some new chat together groups starting in May. All the details are on our website. So if you would like a little small online group of people who are going through the same thing as you, and you can have that completely open and you know, confidential conversation, then go and sign up.
Yeah, go and sign up.
And we've also got groups starting for stage 1 to 3, advanced bowel cancer, living with stoma, and young people. So,
oh, and Holly is saying she highly recommends the chat together sessions. There you go. Check in the post, Holly.
There we are. So have a look at the website and sign up if you think that would be a lovely thing to do for a few weeks.
Helen, thank you so much, and to Attila for keeping us all entertained, and for the very practical, wonderful support.
It's been thanks. Thank
you.
Oh, that was great.
It was great, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And yes, the hand activity was
yes,
quite emotional. I know what Jo means.
Yeah. I completely.
Yes. So now moving on to almost our last session, our last external speaker or speakers of the day. We have a double act, so we're not the only double act on the bill today, Jen.
Oh, is it Anton Day?
It could be, but no, it's Tony and Lauren.
Oh.
So Tony Wyatt, who is an acting clinical specialist physiotherapist at Guy's and St Thomas, is being joined by Lauren Irwin, who is a senior specialist oncology and haematology occupational therapist, and who clearly wins the award for the longest job title of the day.
Absolutely.
Lauren, are joining us. They're both here to talk to us about physical activity after treatment for bowel cancer. So do we have Lauren and Tony?
Should we be getting ready for some star
Well, I don't
jumps,
know. I've got my trainers on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you with us?
Well, I think we should all start doing some shoulder rolls anyway while we wait for them to join.
Yes, maybe.
And then round the other way.
Loosen
and
up.
then, exactly. Perhaps a
Hi.
little stretch.
Hello.
There's Tony.
There's
Brilliant.
Hi Jen, hi Catherine. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Oh, no, thank you, because I understand you have quite a busy day. And so
yeah, there won't be any star jumps.
No star jumps, right.
I'm currently holding onto a 7.5 month pregnancy down here. No star jumps for me.
Please, no, definitely not on our shift.
Well, we've done some shoulder rolls to lift her up a bit.
And we're going to hand over to you.
Lovely. Well, Lauren is definitely here. I think maybe just her video is taking a bit of time to get going, but that's okay because you're stuck with me to begin with. and I can kind of introduce the both of us. So here are our slides. So yeah, the title today is Physical Activity After Treatment for Bowel Cancer. And I'm Tony Wyatt. Lauren Irwin will be on the call in just a moment, I'm sure.
Tony, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Lauren.
Ah, yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I can't get my face up, so it might just be my voice.
Oh, that's such a shame. Your voice is lovely, but your face is better. Lauren and I both work for Guy's and St Thomas's, and we work in their specialist cancer centre. And we're really looking forward to discussing some things with you today. So today we plan to introduce you to ourselves, where we work and who we are, explain the multiple benefits of physical activity before, during and after cancer treatment. Then we're going to discuss the possible barriers to physical activity that you might have, with hopefully some helpful tips to self-manage and overcome these. Then there'll be some time for some questions at the end. So who we are and what we do. So I'm Tony. I've been a qualified physiotherapist now for about 12 years and working in London teaching hospitals for the last 7. Before that, I worked in my local general hospital in Kent, and I've also done some private practice.
And I'm Lauren. I'm an occupational therapist, and I've been qualified also for around 12 years. I started my career working in inpatient rehabilitation hospitals down in Devon, and I moved to London about 8 years ago, and I've been working for Guy's and St Thomas ever since. And I've spent the last 5 in my current role as a specialist oncology and haematology occupational therapist, officially the longest title in the world.
You were listening then. So both Lauren and I's main interest is the complex management of symptoms that people get from cancer itself or cancer treatment. And we look in our clinics to help people to manage the effects of cancer and its treatment in a personalised and individual way. So I'm aware there's lots of you listening today, and everyone's going to be slightly different and come from slightly different medical backgrounds, as in you may have other medical problems and things. So lots of this advice would be beneficial to be tailored, but we're going to cover it quite generically. We really enjoy sharing our knowledge in different situations. So we're members of different tumour groups, and we help to support people from coming from different sort of cancer diagnosis. And we also help provide some presentations for the Guy's Cancer Academy. And recently we've worked alongside a lady from King's College University, and we're just about to await the first publication of a journal, which is really exciting.
Just to give you a bit of background about where we are both based. So we're based at Guy's Cancer Centre, and we opened our doors in around 2016 to our specialist cancer centre. And our vision is to be a world leader in caring for people with cancer, continuously innovating to improve the lives of our patients. And the new building was designed to help deliver that vision through patient-centred practice, being research-driven and clinically led. Tony and I personally are based on a rehab floor within the cancer centre, which incorporates a rehab gym, and activities of daily living space, space for group sessions and for relaxation. You can actually see in the picture that you're looking at the moment, a picture of some of our patients enjoying our gym space.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the benefits of being physically active. So we all know that being active is good for our health, with known benefits in reducing the risk of diabetes, heart disease and stroke. But there is a growing body of scientific evidence to support exercise in all cancer groups, and it's being considered as a 4th treatment option alongside surgery, chemotherapy and radiotherapy for bowel cancer. So it's our job in our specialist cancer rehabilitation roles to work hard in supporting people to be more physically active. And we realise that being better informed about why being physically active would be helpful, and how you might go about it makes this really difficult thing a little bit easier for you. So throughout this, the thing to remember is that doing something is better than doing nothing. So try and focus on the things that you can do and not the things that you can't at the time. The biggest benefits often come from those people that are very sedentary and aren't able to do anything, and then start to try and just move a little bit more and become a little bit physically active. So I just want to draw your attention to the title of today as well. So it is titled Exercise After Bowel Cancer Treatment. And for some of you, this might be clear cut, but for others, that's a bit harder to determine. It might be that you're going to have some different rounds of treatment. So after treatment is quite specific. So for the purpose of this, I'll be talking about exercise throughout a cancer pathway, and I'm open to more specific questions at the end. So one of the biggest things that you're going to find benefit from being slightly more physically active than maybe what is kind of a normal response to having a diagnosis and treatment is the improved medical outcomes that you can see from being physically active. So we know that it can help to improve survival rates, with some research saying that it can increase survival rates from 20 to 30% in the bowel cancer population. It increases the chance of you completing the treatments that the doctors prescribe for you, and it can reduce some of the side effects from treatment. So there's evidence growing that it will reduce the risk of you developing chemotherapy, reduce peripheral neuropathy, and there's lots of evidence about physical activity and fatigue management. As before, I spoke about physical activity and its benefits in other health conditions. So it helps to prevent things like diabetes, stroke, heart disease. That's the last thing that you want, is another medical problem arising on top of your diagnosis. We also know people are living with cancer and other diagnoses, so being physically active can help with those alongside. And it can increase the treatment options available to you. So your oncology team will look at you and think, how robust is this person, and can they manage to withstand some of these toxic treatments that we're going to be providing them with. And often, or sometimes, the consultants will make the decision that you're not fit for that specific treatment. So if we can try and optimize your physical fitness, then that can help you to access further lines of treatment. So physical activity will build your strength and endurance. It will reduce the risk of fatigue, reduce the risk of you losing your muscle strength and like muscle bulk and body. And because of that, you're more likely to be able to take part in the activities that you enjoy, whether that's going for coffee with a friend or playing with your grandchildren. And then we know, and patients have fed back to us, that that has improved their quality of life, even whilst they're undergoing treatment or after treatment. And then we know that being physically active can boost your psychological health and well-being. It can often give people a sense of control and build their confidence in a time when all of those things are kind of out the window for you. And that's where having some guided professional advice can be really beneficial as well. This is another picture of a lady enjoying exercise in the gym. I promise we didn't just get her to pose with a smile. She actually was really, really enjoying it. So now I'm going to just talk a little bit about what is recommended in terms of physical activity. And you might already be aware of this. This comes from our government website. So it's generic advice for every adult to follow. And it starts with 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity each week. This should try and be in 10-minute bouts or more. Twice a week, you should be thinking about strengthening activities, and that might include using weights, but it could also just be yoga. I know it's just talked about before. It's a really good exercise where you're just using your body weight to help with strengthening and control. And some day-to-day activities are also going to help you to do this. So try not to avoid things that are a little bit challenging, especially like lifting heavy, shopping, because this can help to maintain your muscle strength. Now, if you've had surgery, then obviously we wouldn't be pushing you to do much strengthening and heavy lifting straight away. It's important that you follow the post-op advice, but this is something to aim towards. Overall, it's just important to try not to sit for too long, and that's difficult if you're having chemotherapy and it's going on for 6 hours at a time, or you're traveling a lot to appointments, spending time waiting for oncologists in waiting rooms. Just trying to break that seated period up a little bit will do you wonders. So I've explained that, but you're probably thinking, is it safe? How do I start? I've got a stoma now. I don't think I can do this type of exercise that you're suggesting. And also, now's the time for me to rest. I'm going through a lot, my body's going through a lot, and rest is best. So I'm just going to go through these points one by one. So is it safe? Yes, it is safe to exercise on all types of treatment. It's important to adapt the exercise duration and intensity depending on what treatment you're on, where in your treatment cycle you are, and if you have any other health concerns or side effects. So if you've just had surgery, again, post-op advice is really important. If you're on chemotherapy and it's one of those days that you know in the cycle, you get to day 5 and after you've had your infusion, and that's when your symptoms are worse, that's not the time to do it. But on the days where you're feeling like the energy levels are feeling a little bit better, other side effects have settled, then you think, what is something I can do rather than things that I can't? Now, remember, moderate activity to person A is different to moderate activity to person B. So what's recommended for one person isn't going to be the same for someone else. And I will kind of try and decipher what moderate activity would mean for you in the next slide. So how do you start? Slow and steady, basically, little and often, and build up. So maybe think, right, I am someone that sits a lot and I haven't been doing very much. Can I start to just increase my step count? Once you've built your confidence with that, once you realize, actually, it's not made me feel worse, it's cleared my head a little bit, it's made me feel a bit better for doing something, then you might think about increasing your physical activity to a point that it is deemed as exercise, and it's a little bit more challenging, and you're thinking about, how can I start to strengthen these arms, or my legs are feeling a bit weak, how can I think about a program to strengthen them? It's important that you give yourself time, because things won't change overnight, and also recognize if you're doing something that might be too much or the wrong type of exercise. And we know to look out for things like pain, shortness of breath, or increased fatigue. They would all be like warning signs to say, actually, that was too much. Doesn't mean stop. It means, what have I done and how can I adapt it so it's achievable for me at the moment? So those that have a stoma or have had abdominal surgery, exercise is really important before and after any abdominal surgery. Now, it's never too late to strengthen some of your core muscles, even if you haven't been given that advice or the support from your team. It can help to reduce the risk of hernia and other side effects like lower back pain. It's important to think, yes, someone's told me not to lift heavy items post-op, but often we're not told when you can start to lift again. So it's not a clear thing from you're not allowed to you can. Exercise is really important to build up to the point where you can get back to that normal life and you don't have to constantly worry about lifting things that are too heavy. And for the rest of us that haven't had any surgery, we often don't use our abdominal muscles enough, and we end up with lower back pain, especially if we've been sat around a lot. So abdominal exercises are really important. So rest is best is a bit of a myth. It was an older kind of message that was sent out by medical teams previously, before evidence was increased around the area. And you still might hear some nurses or doctors that say, you know, rest up. We know that when you rest, you're sitting more, longer, you can deteriorate quite quickly. So deconditioning of your muscles happens quite quickly. And then that can get into a bit of a vicious cycle of finding things harder to do. So whilst you're on treatment, it's important to try and keep your physical activity up, even if it can maintain you at a certain level. So once you come out to the other side of treatment, you can start to use exercise to build you back up again, rather than you dropping quite considerably in your health and your strength whilst you're on treatment because you've not moved very much. It's important to remember that exercise can be helpful in preparing you for the next type of treatment that you're going to be facing, supporting you in returning to your normal life after treatment, but also in some cases can help you to live a much more active life if you're living with cancer. So we're just thinking now about your exercise program. Just pushing my notes forward, sorry. So exercise should be individual to you, and it should be based on your previous level of fitness, factoring in any complications and previous medical history. So the first thing to think about is always warm up and cool down for that matter. It's very important for everyone, especially with those with pre-existing health conditions. The aim is to raise your heart rate slowly and remember to stretch. So stretching and flexibility exercises are a great way of introducing exercise for somebody that hasn't been used to moving. They help to prevent injury, and they're also effective in helping with symptoms such as cramp or that muscle soreness that you get from doing some activity that you're not used to doing. The second thing to consider is to try and strengthen key muscle groups. So thinking about strengthening large muscle groups at a time, and some of the movements that you can focus on are like an upper limb movements that push or pull. And then with your lower limb, it would be movements such as a squat or a lunge. All these movement patterns can be adapted to how strong you are at the time. So for instance, you can stand from a chair and lower yourself down slowly. That's a squatting type movement, but the chair's there to save you. So it's not as hard as squatting unsupported. To make this harder, you might squat unsupported, or you might use a weight and hold on to some weights and increase the squat. That's just one example for you. And then to know whether you're lifting the right kind of weight, you want to think about doing 3 sets of 8 to 12 repetitions. So you'll do 8 to 12 repetitions, have a rest, and then do 2 more sets the same with a rest in between. You'll know if you're lifting a heavy enough weight if you get to kind of 7 or 8 repetitions and you start to feel it in your muscle, you push forwards and complete your set. But you shouldn't be kind of unable to complete the last 2 or 3. That means the weight is too heavy for you. So, sorry, number 3 is focusing on your core muscles. So don't forget these, and I've just briefly spoken about them there. The first difficulty or hurdle is to locate what muscles you're trying to recruit. So if everyone who feels comfortable would like to follow just something that helps us to locate what muscles I'm talking about, you can put your hands on the table in front of you or on your lap. And what I want you to do is just push down and hold that push. And as you hold that push, you should feel that there's some muscles right at the bottom of your tummy that are tightening. Now, control is key. You should be able to breathe. You should be able to talk, but they should be tense. And it's these muscles that we aim to train. The muscles here can be trained really well with some basic sort of mat style exercises, and Pilates, for instance, is a really good place to start. It's often easier to do that with some guidance. It's important that you're doing it well. And it's also important, if you've had surgery or you've got a stoma, that you're not increasing the pressure in your thorax too much. So you'll feel that pressure. It's not about you're not allowed to lift a certain amount or you're not allowed to do a certain thing, because like I said, one person isn't going to be the same as someone else. Your 90-year-old granny compared to your 20-year-old nephew are going to be able to do different things at a moderate level. And it's the same with this. So someone that was previously fit and their core muscles are very strong might be able to lift a bit more than someone that hasn't done that, but it's how it feels subjectively to you. So think about the pressure inside and how much you're exerting yourself, and build up slowly. Number 4 is picking the right intensity. So a good way to start to build fitness is to increase intensity of exercise. We're trying to increase the demand that we put on our heart and our lungs, which is also called our cardiovascular system. So a safe way to start this is maybe going for a walk. You might get to a hill, or you might be walking on a flat surface. For a period of time, I want you to try and increase the rate you're walking at. So you might pick a bench in the distance or a street light and think, okay, I'm going to walk a bit faster until I get there. Once you get there, you go back to your normal walking pace. During that time, it should increase your breathing rate a little bit. And that means you're hitting a moderate intensity. So a good thing to think about is that, can you talk but not sing? So you're pushing yourself to a point where your breathing's deeper, but if someone had a conversation with you, you could still talk to them. But if I asked you to sing a nursery rhyme, it might be a bit difficult to get that breath in. And then you know that you're working a little bit more at a moderate intensity, and your body's going to make physiological changes to support with that, and you'll get fitter. So the time you least feel like exercises is probably the time that you need it the most. And guidance is always really helpful at this point, because no one can, when it's happening to you, you think, oh, is this right? Am I making things worse? Am I going to do myself some damage? So we know that it's not easy, and we hope now to just go through some of the things that you might be thinking, oh, that's going to stop me from just increasing my activity because I feel this way. So the first thing is fatigue, and I'm going to hand over to Lauren.
Thanks, Tony. As Tony mentioned, one of the things that we find people experience as a really big barrier to exercise and being generally physically active is fatigue. We know that it's a really commonly experienced symptom for people with a cancer diagnosis and can massively impact what you're able to do. Tony and I could talk for hours about fatigue, and we work really closely with people around managing it. It is a really complex symptom, but just for now, just sort of a little bit of information about it, just so that when you're thinking about physical activity, if this is a barrier, you can be aware and start to think about how you might manage that. My guess is that some or many of you listening will have experienced fatigue at some point, or are experiencing fatigue at the minute. We think it's caused by the cancer and the treatment, and we know that it is a really subjective experience. So how one person finds fatigue is different to how the next person does, and it can be impacted by lots of different things, like mood, pain, appetite, and those things that impact again can be different from person to person. So it's a really subjective individual experience, and we find that fatigue and tiredness are often thought of as the same thing, and actually they're different, and fatigue is different to a normal tiredness. And we find that fatigue is sort of more characterized by being disproportionately tired. So you're much more tired than we would reasonably expect, considering what activity you've been doing.
So it's worth thinking about the difference between a tiredness and a fatigue, because they aren't the same things and people can have both. So being aware of that can be helpful. And we find that people experience fatigue in different domains. For example, people can experience a very physical fatigue, so a fatigue caused by being active, doing active things, and that causes your level of fatigue. Equally, you can be completely sedentary, sitting down, but can have a level of fatigue caused by lots of cognitive tasks. So, you know, if you're on the computer for a long time, if you're having to do lots of thinking, if you're having to do lots of complex communication, even though you might not be moving, that could also cause a level of fatigue as well. And then you've also got an emotional element as well, where things like stress and worry can also cause, you know, a level of fatigue, and people can have fatigue in all these areas. Just be aware there are lots of resources to help if fatigue is a problem. So do have a look for those if that would be helpful.
I'm aware of time, so I'm not going to spend too long on this diagram, but we just know that fatigue leads to people doing less. And then there's some deconditioning, which I think I've explained already. It can lead to some physical signs that actually your muscles are wasting, which can make your fatigue worse. And a way to help to stop this and to stop it impacting in your life is to try and focus on this doing less and just trying to increase your activity as much as you can. So back over to Lauren for some sleep.
And I know that this may have been mentioned previously, and again, I will go fairly quickly just because I know we're limited for time, but what we know is that sleep can be a really big barrier to physical activity levels and what we're able to do. And research has shown that sort of 30 to 60% of people who've had cancer experience significant sleep problems. We really need sleep for lots of different reasons and things that enable us to be physically active. So you can see here on this slide just some examples of things that we really need sleep so that our bodies are able to do, and all these things will help us be more physically active. So things like good sleep reduces your emotional imbalances, helps your motivation levels, helps your body repair and rejuvenate. It enhances all of your cognitive functioning, so your concentration, your memory, your alertness. It restores your adrenals, that's your adrenal glands that help regulate things like metabolism, immune system, blood pressure, promotes your health and well-being, and pain supports the regulation and experience of pain. So we need sleep for lots of things that are really going to help towards us being physically active. Thanks, Tony. So just quickly a few top tips of things that might be helpful to think about if you're finding sleep to be a problem. So helpful things are having a dark room, having good nutrition and hydration, trying to fight drowsiness after food, particularly keeping your bedroom for calming activities only, not eating and doing work in there, creating a perfect bedroom space, so thinking about light, noise, comfort, regular exercise, establishing sleep-wake bedtime routines, so a nice wind-down routine before bed and set bedtime and wake-up times, and reducing daytime sleeping. Some things that can be unhelpful, again, apologies quite quickly, reading with backlit devices can be really unhelpful for sleep. Stimulants, things like coffees, alcohol, those sorts of things, fizzy drinks can be really detrimental to your sleep. Doing anything too mentally or physically taxing right before sleep, or stressful and emotional difficult situations before sleep. Going to sleep or going to bed if you're not sleeping. Screens, so TVs, phones, iPads, all of those are really, really unhelpful around sleep or if you're waking at night. Napping can be unhelpful if you are waking up not feeling replenished from that nap, or that nap is interfering with your nighttime sleeping, that can be unhelpful. And staying in bed to catch up on sleep can also be unhelpful as well. Thanks, Tony. Just another area we just wanted to really quickly touch on was about work. we know that there's a lot of people either trying to go back into work after treatment, or who have stayed in work. And we know that if you have been less physically active, that can be really difficult, because most jobs demand a certain amount of physical or mental exertion, or usually both. So just some ideas to think about if you are trying to stay in work or trying to get back into work. So thinking about simulating some work style tasks before you go back into work. Tony was talking earlier about starting slow and steady and gradually building up, and that's also relevant here. So thinking about things you could try doing in a more paced way before necessarily going straight back into work. Pre-planning what you might need before you go back into work, thinking about any adaptions, any phased returns, things your workplace can do to make work more achievable if being more physically active is difficult. If you need access to sort of facilities, toilets, that sort of things nearby, having an idea in your head about that and communicating that to your workplace can be really helpful. And just being aware that you do have rights. You are covered under the Equality and Diversity Act, so just having a bit of understanding of that to help guide conversations with work can be really helpful. So just to finish off, some top tips sort of from everything that we've talked about. So plan, prioritise and pace are really key helpful things to talk about and think about. Make a habit of moving more. Stick to your plan. So adapt exercises and activities as you need to. Don't not do anything. Adapt things instead. Find the right level of exercise and activity for you. Try and find something you enjoy. It's really important. If you don't enjoy it, you're much less likely to do it. So finding something that you enjoy can be really, really useful. And look for help. Seek guidance as soon as possible, really. There are lots of services out there and information on the internet to help support, with all these areas. So do reach out if you're struggling. And the earlier, the better, Tony and I always say. And I think that's all from us today. And I think we're going to open the floor for questions.
If we have time.
Yeah, you are. No, it's fine. Some really, really good stuff in there. And we have got some questions.
Quite a few.
We have. So we will rattle through them. So Dee asks, what's the best exercise when you have fatigue?
So just like in our top tip, it's what is the best thing for you. So, which sounds like a little kind of applause. No. First of all, it's something that you're going to enjoy. We know that something that you find enjoyable is going to help to boost you and boost your fatigue and your energy levels. So it's definitely not something that you hate doing, for one. For two, it's something that's little and often, rather than thinking, right, I know I've been told now that exercise is going to help my fatigue, and you go out and you do something for half an hour and then you can't do anything for a week or two, or it puts you off for 3 months. So it should be gentle. You should build it up, and then you should just start to think about those domains that I spoke about. So have you warmed up? Have you done some strengthening type and stretches? And then are you doing something for your cardiovascular exercise? But using the idea of just building something for a short period and then coming back to like your normal walking rate is a good way to just start to try and increase intensity.
Yes.
If you're having symptoms that are stopping you from being able to do it, like breathlessness, or your fatigue is getting worse, then it is definitely something that the evidence suggests a personalised programme from some healthcare professionals is going to help you better than generic advice.
So that sort of follows that. Liz has asked a question which sort of follows on from that. So she says she had major surgery and chemo in 2017 and again in 2020 for recurrence. Still quite fit, but gets really sore muscles after exercise and lots of general stiffness. And she's asking, is this down to the chemo? And what can I do to help? But it sounds like what you're saying is get some specialist help.
Because she's already doing loads of stretching and yoga, so she's covering that bit off.
Yeah, no, that's really good, and just well done, because we know from experience as well, especially when there's reoccurrence, and you know, to say I've been through this once and I'm trying to help myself after, and then there's been an episode of reoccurrence and then you're still looking for ways to improve is amazing. So but I would say, yeah, if it's specific aches and pains that aren't changing, then a personalized program is going to be something that it might be that you can build some intensity in a place like a swimming pool or a hydrotherapy pool that can help with combating those symptoms to start with.
That's a good idea. We've got another one here from Jessica and Steve Taylor, and basically saying post-surgery, I've been doing a lot of cycling on my Peloton, lifting weights, strength work. What exercises and durations do you recommend? I am 10 weeks post-surgery, so that's quite soon after surgery, right?
Yeah, that is quite soon. So that's really good. I'd hope that there wasn't maybe too much resistance through your Peloton to start with, but it's really important to get those core muscles strong from the start. And if anyone's ever tried any Pilates, you think you're quite strong, and then you go and someone says, oh, that technique's not very good, or you've not got great control. So it may be good to think about that as an exercise. But I think the question was about kind of duration and what to aim for. So you could be exercising at a low level for hours and hours and you're not getting much benefit. So it's thinking about, is it the right intensity for me? Building up slowly so you're not stressing your abdominal muscles too much. But just sticking to the government recommendations, but making sure that the exercises that you're doing are challenging enough as well.
So is that sing test you were talking about? You can talk, but you can't sing.
Yeah, so that's for that cardiovascular, you're pushing yourself enough to that point. Yeah.
Okay, we've had a couple of questions about hernias. We've had a question from Dave, who developed a hernia and is a little bit concerned that lifting weights could be causing it to grow. Says he does wear the support pants to support the hernia, but just wants an opinion on that. But then we also had one from someone else who said, what can I do to avoid getting a hernia? When I carry heavy weights like shopping bags, it still doesn't feel right.
Yeah, okay. So if you've already got a hernia, the exercise won't make it worse as long as it's done in a controlled way. But what often happens in life is we don't do things very controlled, and we'll go from not really doing anything to cutting a tree down in a garden, or lifting things that you've not lifted. You go on holiday and you're lifting a suitcase that's 20 kilos and you've not lifted that for a year since the last time you went on holiday. So it is that building up. And that's why the Pilates exercises are really helpful. Yes, hernia belts are there to support, but remember, we still have the infrastructure from our muscles to help to do that. We just have to engage them correctly, which is quite difficult. We're often spending a long time talking about pelvic floor and lower abdominal muscles with patients in clinic. And it's getting to know what the right words are for your brain to realize and make the connection. And the second question, I think, is was about exercise to help reduce the risk of hernia. So again, building up, thinking about those abdominal muscles to start with. There is a exercise instructor who has some online free videos for people that have stomas and ostomy. It's called Ostomy Studio, and it's by Sarah Russell. So she does some that you have to pay for, but there are some kind of free taster sessions in there. She also has a book that is really helpful at kind of getting your head around what it means to you, and especially it's recovery after bowel cancer, the book's called. So I can certainly give you the links.
That would be really great. Yeah. Thank you. That person also did say, is breaststroke swimming okay?
As long as you're not feeling like when you get into the pool that there is that tension and pressure. Yeah. So it depends on your body composition. If you're quite musculature in composition, you might feel that you don't float as easy. So actually breaststroke is quite difficult, and other people float really easily and they won't feel very much strain through. So yeah, it is dependent on you.
Yeah. So we've just got quickly, I think, time to wrap up a few around kind of nerves and pain. So we've got one question about, are there any exercises that can help for if you're suffering from peripheral neuropathy, particularly in your feet? Somebody who's got nerve damage following robotic surgery, and have had some neurophysio, but who can best help going forward. And then another one from Bobby, who had intense pains in the legs before diagnosis. It sort of went away during chemo, but now it's come back. And is not sure if it's muscular or bone related, thinks it's muscular. Any suggestions on things that might reduce the pain? He's been trying walking.
Yeah, I think certainly if you're in any pain that's intense and it's not going away, then you need a medical review, just so you can try and establish where that's coming from. That's the first thing to say, really, for that last comment. The other things, chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy, the research is growing around aerobic exercise. So that's the exercise where your heart and your lungs are working hard.
Yes.
Both on treatment and after. So even if you've established some CIPM, we shorten it to often, we know that it can help. However, actually dealing with the painful and normally hypersensitive side effects of it is quite difficult. So on your feet especially, we ignore them, we put shoes and socks on and we don't touch them. So massage, touch, different textures, just to try and stimulate the nerves to say, actually, we shouldn't be responding with a painful response here. It's just something passing past my skin, and that's not something that should be causing such a response. And we can dampen it down. The other thing to focus on is balance exercises, because the way our brain can interpret the pressure on the bottom of our feet is damaged with CIPM. So it will make you feel more unbalanced. And the way that we go about that is compensatory exercises that train you in using other muscle groups and hones your balance system, so it improves your quality of life and you're not worried about when you're walking on uneven ground and things as much. The nerve surgery, the nerve injury after surgery, I think it depends, again, I think it would need a more in-depth assessment, really, of how that's affecting that person. We know that we come from a very privileged pocket of the country for patients that have surgery or treatment at Guy's, and they have the opportunity to see us as therapists, and it's not always equitable across the country. So do go to your GP or your MDT at the hospital and say, I know that some specialists exist and I really need to speak to them. A therapist, like a physiotherapist or occupational therapist that's in your local community, should also be able to access and upskill if they need to. They've got the basis knowledge to be able to help you. So just search for referrals through your services for that individualized support. But you're all so entitled to it. So just ask.
That's the perfect place to finish, isn't it?
Yes, that's come through loud and clear today, hasn't it? It's the thread that's run through everything.
Definitely.
It's where we started actually with Claire. She said there are things that you can do to fix all of this. You don't have to put up with it.
You just have to know what you're asking for.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Tony,
Thank you so much, Tony. Thank you, Lauren. It's been great having you join us, and we've had lots and lots and lots of questions.
I've learned so much.
Yeah, definitely.
That neat trick about putting your hand on your knees and pushing. Who knew?
We're all going to be sat in meetings pulling slightly funny faces now. But you and
that's
I
just the start, though. That's just the initiation. That's just telling you where they are. You're not going to get a six-pack from doing that.
I was thinking that and a handful of chicken, and I was on it for today. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for having us.
We've had some lovely comments as well, so it's brilliant. Thank you. It's been so appreciated.
And good luck.
Good luck in 6 weeks' time.
So that's brought us quite close to the end, and we know we are running over time, but we felt, didn't we, that it was so rich. There was so much stuff in that last presentation, and so many really good questions. We wanted to give everyone the opportunity to ask their question. So what should be happening now I should be whizzing you through a slide deck of what we at Bowel Cancer UK have on offer that you can make use of and our services to access. So I am going to do that. I will do it at pace, but you will get these slides as well. We've mentioned.
Imagine the countdown clock is going on in the background.
Okay, so here goes. So we do have our online forum. I'm sure many of you who are with us today already know our forum. We've got over 6,000 members, and it's just a brilliant place where you can go on, find people who've had similar experiences to you. You can ask a question, and the community is just so supportive.
So friendly and warm, welcoming.
They'll welcome you in and answer your questions. So you can find that on our website homepage, the online community button. We also have a number of Facebook groups, and they are closed Facebook groups, and they are for specific groups of patients or carers. And they focus on a particular topic. So we have one around living with stage 4 cancer. We have one for caregivers. We have immunotherapy, and we've just launched a new one on pelvic exenteration surgery. So again, you can find the details of those on our website. We also have our Ask the Nurse service. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask a nurse, you can send us an email at nurse@bowelcanceruk.org.uk, and one of our nurses will get back to you within a couple of days, answering your question and perhaps signposting you to more information. We've talked a lot today about Chat Together, so I won't talk more about that.
It's been lovely to see people in the chat saying how much they've enjoyed their experience. Yeah.
So yeah, all that information is on our website. For those of you in Wales, and I think we did have some people joining us from Wales, we are
Borodar.
Yeah, Borodar indeed. We are trialling an approach to patient engagement to try and involve patients in ensuring that services are delivered in exactly the right way and providing exactly the right support. And if you're interested in having your voice heard along with other like-minded loud voices in Wales, you can join our Bowel Cancer Community Voices.
It's great that they're listening, and it's a real opportunity to shape services going forward. So get stuck in there.
Absolutely. It's Bowel Cancer Awareness Month, as Jen said at the beginning, and we've been running online bowel cancer awareness talks for people to sign up to. So if off the back of this, you want to say to your, I don't know, children, neighbours, partners,
workplace,
parents, where you work, if you want them to do an awareness talk or you know have people watch, then you can signpost them to our website and they can sign up.
We're going live next week.
We are live next week.
Yeah.
Yes. We also have lots of health information, which we've been doing shout outs for throughout this event. You can order quite a few of our publications as booklets that will be sent out to you, but also you can access them as digital PDFs, which you can download and print
off. Yeah.
Yourself. So okay, for those of you who are recently diagnosed, we do also have an app that's been, not an app, sorry, a mobile phone text-based course, which has been designed to help you with the anxiety and the sort of psychological impact of that diagnosis. So it's free to use, you just scan the QR code and you get a text message, series of text messages every day for 5 days, showing videos and giving advice and sharing tips on how to cope. And I would say it's really good for anybody with anxiety. I've done it. I don't have a bowel cancer diagnosis, but it definitely helped. So that's available again on our website.
And that's new, isn't it?
That's
and people are loving it.
They are.
Yeah.
Then we also have our walking program. So yes, these are fundraisers for us, but they're actually really, really good ways to start doing some of that exercise that Lauren and Tony were talking about and overcoming fatigue. So Walk Together is taking place this June. You go on a 5-mile walk with friends, family, colleagues, get them to sponsor you, and it's a fun. You did it last year. I did it last year. It's a great way to get out.
Got a bunch of friends and the family together, and we had a lovely walk actually. And you don't have to do 5 miles. You can do 5K. You can do it over the whole of June. It doesn't have to be
spread it out. Use it as part of your rehab.
Yeah,
I guess
absolutely.
Treatment. And for those of you in Wales again, there's a sunset trek.
I really want to do this. It was stunning.
Along the coastal path. Again, more details on our website. So, that was a whistle-stop tour. And I think I'm supposed to be in charge, am I, of getting rid of this? And I now can't.
Well,
So
not to worry.
we'll just
Not
talk
to worry.
around the slides.
Yeah.
So just a huge thank you to everybody who's stuck with us today. I want to say a massive thank you to all of our speakers. So let's see if we can get this right. We had Claire.
We did.
We had Joanna.
We did.
We had Darren.
Yes.
We had Helen.
Yes.
We had Tony. We had Lauren.
Well
Brilliant.
done.
Nailed it. Loads of really great content, and we will be sending the slides out.
Yeah.
I also want to say thank you to our financial sponsors, Pierre Fabre,
Yeah.
for funding this and enabling us to bring you this event, and also to the hidden Bowel Cancer UK team. Jen and I are, we've got the easy job, but behind the scenes have been our fantastic staff, you know, getting the slides up, turning screens on and off, answering questions, keeping the chat going. So to Richard and Hayley and Claire and everybody else behind the scenes, just a huge thank you. And most of all, a massive thank you to all of you. You've given up a few hours of your Saturday. We hope it's been useful. We hope it's been uplifting.
Yes.
We hope that you're taking something away from it. And we will be in touch with you, not only with the slides, but also with the evaluation. So if you've got any ideas for how we can do things differently or better, it would be amazing.
Or more things you'd like to hear about. It would be super helpful for us. So if you please could do that, we'd be really grateful. But thank you so much for coming. We've loved it, haven't we?
We have.
Always learned so much.
We do. We have a great time.
Yeah.
We've all learnt which muscles to clench, and Darren said go drink expensive red wine.
That's my take up.
So
we didn't talk as much about cake this time.
We didn't talk about cake this time.
Chicken and wine.
Chicken and wine. And on that note, goodbye everyone.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everyone. Bye.